I'd like to call the Health and Human Services Committee meeting to order for January 26, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Gunther. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present.
Alderwoman Weiss.
Present.
Alderman Todd.
Present.
Alderman Page.
Present.
Alderman Grass.
Here.
Chair Ingrassia.
Present.
Alderman Gunther. We have 6 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We will move through a number of the items on our agenda and go straight to Board Bill 176. I'm typically pass this over to the Vice Chair, but there's just so much happening this evening that I'm going to spare everybody having to run the meeting, and I will do this myself. But Board Bill 176 before us, and it is a approximately $1.3 million in opioid settlement money that is going to go to the health department. You may notice that there's a committee substitute in your folders. Please just disregard that. But there is, if it's helpful information to you, a line item that's listed in the committee substitute that is not in the original Board Bill 176. If you're interested in a more detailed analysis of what the money is going to be spent on. And then I would like to open it up to Craig and Scott if they would like to make any comments or provide some more detailed information for the committee.
Thank you, Alderwoman and members of the committee. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight, especially for good news. So as the chairwoman indicated and sponsored this bill, there are opioid settlement funds that are a result of those opioid distributors who were selling this poison essentially. And these are funds that have come to the city of St. Louis. As you know, I don't need to tell you that we have a fentanyl and opioid crisis in our town that is even greater than our homicide numbers. So these funds, as the chairwoman indicated, would come to the health department for a number of reasons, primarily for us to put out requests for proposals and notices of funding availability so that some of those great organizations that are in our community providing many of these services to provide relief to people who are undergoing these overdoses can have some of that relief. There's also monies for some internal purposes in case we bring in other parts of city government, also for health and safety supplies, such things as Narcan, hygiene bags, other kinds of things. I've been going around at various times where we hand this out to individuals who might be unhoused or might be in areas where this is a very important focus area. I would like as well, Alderwoman, as you indicated, to have Scott, who is here with us from the CDC and has been doing a lot of work with his team, as you know, to bring the behavioral health, get the behavioral health bureau up and running. And so Scott can give us additional background with regard to this funding. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Scott, if you could just introduce yourself to the committee quickly. I think some of us don't know you yet, and provide any information you'd like us to have, and then we can open it up to the committee members for questions.
Sure. Thank you, Alderwoman. My name is Dr. Scott Sims, and I am the project director for the OD2A collaboration between the CDC Foundation and the Department of Health. And I've been working in the community since this past September. I have a team of 7 individuals, and I would say most important for this is I think we have been working in the community since September. We had a 1-week site visit in December, and we've met with over 100 different community members and about 40 or 50 different agencies at this point. Through a strategic planning process. And so we've been in depth and engaged with the community as much as possible, and have really used that knowledge to shape a strategic plan that will be finished in the next few months. But luckily, we've been able to use that data and that information from the community to think about how we distribute these funds in ways that would most benefit the community based on the needs that we've been hearing. We also completed a community snapshot, which is on the DOH website now, along with some maps about service provision and where you can see And we plan to really try to target these dollars to increase service access and address issues in specific areas of the city where we see gaps. And so we've really tried to be very thoughtful and very data driven on how we begin to do this work and how we hope to use these funds in the community. So I hope that's helpful context.
Yes, that's super. I saw in the chat that the clerk asked about swearing people in. Both of these individuals are working for the city, so I think we're in the clear there. Go ahead, Craig.
I was going to swear in if you needed it.
Nope. I guess for some reason we believe you'll tell the truth and people who don't work for the city will not. But that's just rolling along according to our rules, but appreciate the question. I will open it up to members of the committee for questions. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
No questions at the moment. Thanks for this. You're right. This is good news. Thanks for bringing the bill. And Scott, thanks for giving us a little bit of a briefing on what you're up to, and looking forward to hopefully watching more of this work, but from the non-board side here in a couple of months. So thank you.
Alderman Todd.
I don't have any questions, Madam Chair, but thank you for bringing this good news to our city.
Alderman Page.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions. I just think this is a wonderful piece of legislation for the city, and I pray that it will bring good results. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Grass.
Hi, quick question. Do we know if there's going to be more opioid settlement money coming in the future? I was involved actually in some of this litigation, like right when it started. I represented a small county in Illinois, and then, you know, I left that job, and I know since then the litigation kind of spread out, and there's a bunch of different settling defendants, and it's kind of a, and I didn't get the impression that the entire thing was over. So I didn't know if you guys are expecting more money, or if you, or at some time future, or if you've talked to the city councilor, or they are, or what's going on.
No, I don't have anything to announce tonight, Alderman Grass, but I will say I always consider that, you know, we work with what we have currently. I do agree with you. I do think that there may be some other monies down in the future, but obviously there's been the settlement, and then they have to actually get it from the distributors. So this is what they've gotten so far, and this is what they've distributed to us. It usually goes through the feds and then the state, and then comes over to us. So we do not know any more than what we currently have. But obviously, if more comes, that would be welcome, because the pain and harm to this community has been well in excess of these dollars.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Alderman. With that, I will entertain a motion to pass Board Bill 180. I'm sorry, it's the wrong board bill. Board Bill 176 out with the due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Gunther, Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice,
Aye.
Alderman Todd,
Aye.
Alderman Page,
Aye.
Alderman Grass,
Aye.
Chair Ingrassia,
Aye.
Alderman Gunther. We have 6 aye votes.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion, and we have passed Board Bill 176 with a due pass recommendation. Thank you for your support. We are moving on to item number 2, which is Board Bill 180, the establishment of a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction. This is exciting and overwhelming. We have, I think, 57 speakers on this evening, which I think illustrates how critical the need is and how much the community is behind this at this point. So just to sort of set the stage for how this is going to work tonight, I've got several members of the community in St. Louis and out of state who are experts in this area, and then a number of committed members of the community who are just individuals who are taking time to be here to present to us. And so I just want to remind people, we give individuals 2 minutes to testify outside of the expert realm. And that's usually probably not enough time, but we will give 2 minutes this evening. But if you have the ability to make your statements more concise, so that we maintain the number of aldermen that we need to be at the meeting. And so maybe some other folks are able to share more details if they have them, if they have personal experiences and such. Just please be mindful of that. And I hate to do that. I hate to ask that because I know many of you who have signed up have personal stories about how critical this board bill is to you. And so if you're not familiar, Board Bill 180 would establish a right to counsel in the city of St. Louis. And a right to counsel is the ability for tenants who are facing eviction to have access to free legal representation. 2017 marked the first year that a program like this existed. New York City was the first to implement it. Now there are at least 15 cities in several states who have taken this on between 2017 and 2022, including, because I know a lot of times it's difficult for us to mirror what's happening in places like New York or San Francisco, but Kansas City, Minneapolis, Louisville, Cleveland have all been able to implement this. And it's been on the books for long enough that there's actual data on the returns of why this not only is the right thing to do from a humanitarian perspective, but also the correct thing to do from a cost savings perspective. In fact, the White House released a blueprint this week for renters' rights, and right to counsel was mentioned in it under diversion and relief. Right to counsel is something that the Biden administration finds critically important. And so with that, I will open it up for our first speakers, and there's no time restraints on the experts. I have discussed that probably 5 to 10 minutes is appropriate, and I would love to introduce to you John Pollock, who's the coordinator for the National Coalition for a Right to Counsel. John, I have to swear you in. Do you affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is going to be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. I think there may have been a question from Alderwoman Rice. She was.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for noticing that. I did not. Go ahead, Alderwoman from the 8th.
That's okay. I really quickly wanted to add, even though the time is limited tonight, if you have the opportunity to write your story up, we are more than happy to take those and read those as well. So if you get cut off tonight, or if you have to leave, please send an email either to the clerk or to Alderwoman Ingrassia or myself. We'll get them circulated. Your stories are important and really supportive of this. So we do want to hear you. We're just time constrained. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. I appreciate it. John, please proceed.
Thank you. I will just get my slides in order, and then I will get started. Can you see them okay? Are they displaying? Wonderful. So thank you so much for asking me to join today's session. My name is John Pollock. I'm the coordinator of the National Coalition for a Civil Right to Counsel. And who we are basically is an organization of about 600 participants in 45 different states, including a number in St. Louis and also around Missouri. And we basically provide support for right to counsel efforts in a variety of areas, but housing is definitely one of our biggest growth areas. And Alderwoman Ingrassia mentioned that there are 18 jurisdictions with the right to counsel. So far, we've actually worked in all 18 of them, providing support at various levels, and we're involved in another 30 to 40 efforts in other cities, counties, and states around the country currently. What I wanted to talk to just like very briefly is just to highlight a couple of the justifications for why this movement has grown so much, and then talk to you about what's happening in the other places within 5 to 10 minutes. But basically, it's because, we're here today because housing cases are devastating. They are a basic human needs case. And one that we actually say there's practically no other kind of basic human need that isn't affected by housing, because people who lose their housing can lose their physical liberty if they are homeless and get arrested. They can lose their health on the street. They can lose their child custody if they don't have a stable home and their children wind up in foster care. Their kids can lose access to education. It just goes on and on. There's virtually nothing it doesn't touch when someone's housing is lost. And that is really the main motivator for this work. But it's also, when you look at some of the statistics, like the national statistics about representation rates, like 3% average for tenants and 81% for landlords, that's a massive disparity. And the system has really become very inequitable because of that representational disparity. The courts don't really represent both sides equally. They're not seeing both sides equally. They're seeing one side's story as being the one that they want to hear, that they do hear, and the tenant story is often not told. We also know that there are significant financial benefits provided counsel. I'll touch on that in a bit. And that right to counsel will also see that basically is changing the way that the system actors, both the courts and the real estate community, act after a right to counsel gets into place. So these are all the things that motivate this national movement. And there are many more. One, I think that's especially extremely important is race equity. We know that the vast majority of people going through eviction are people of color. That was actually even worse during the pandemic because of how hard BIPOC communities were hit by the virus itself, which then increased income instability and then increased eviction exposure. So that really is, a really significant reason why this should happen. Just to look at Baltimore, an example, Black women especially face eviction at like almost 4 times the rate of white renters. These statistics are actually the same pretty much everywhere. There's virtually no place where we haven't seen this disparity. It's just a question of how extreme that disparity is. And it's, again, a big reason why we're involved in this work. It's also worth noting, sometimes we'll get the question about, well, aren't evictions basically these simple proceedings that just involve someone who didn't pay rent? It is true that many of the cases are about non-payment of rent, but even in those cases, there are many things that an attorney still has to look at to determine if the case was handled correctly, if it was filed correctly, if the rent was processed correctly. Courts do not act as gatekeepers for these cases. They don't look to see if the landlords have complied with even the basic law about notice or filing requirements or anything else. And as governments act to provide more tenant protections, for instance, in jurisdictions that added requirements that a landlord apply for rental assistance before they file for eviction, the courts are not checking to make sure that the landlords have complied with those requirements. That's basically left to the tenant to do, and the tenants don't know to do that, and they don't know how to do that in the process. So we really do see that there's a lot legally that a tenant's attorney has to do. And even if none of those defenses are actually applicable, there's still the question about where's the tenant, how much time is the tenant going to have to vacate? Is this eviction going to be on their record? And how much of a rent arrear will they have? And if those questions are determined without an attorney for the tenant, they will almost always lose on every one of those aspects. They will wind up in an eviction. They will wind up with almost no time to leave, and they will wind up with a massive rent judgment, all of which ensures they will not secure future housing. So basically, the attorney's presence is absolutely essential in every case. That's why we're not talking about, trying to find the best cases and then providing counsel just for those. Every tenant needs it, whether they're going to be able to stay in the unit or not. And then, when you add remote hearings and other things that have added, I don't know if St. Louis is currently doing those or was doing those, but that adds, both accessibility questions for tenants who don't have the technology or how to use it. And then lastly, rental assistance is great, but some tenants still need help applying for it. And even if they've applied, getting the landlord may refuse to accept it. The court may try to evict them, even if they have rental assistance in hand. These are all things that, you need counsel for. Before we even had any city or state that passed a right to counsel, we had already seen statistics from all over the country that showed that representation for tenants made a difference in a variety of ways. How many tenants stayed in their homes, whether or not how much money they paid to the landlords. And like this great statistic in Hennepin County, Minnesota, where they found that tenants were 4 times less likely to use a shelter if they were represented by counsel. So we knew all of that before we had anywhere past a right to counsel. And just a last note, about costs. evictions are so incredibly expensive to St. Louis. Like basically this statistic found that nationally evictions cost about $315 billion to governments every year because of the cost. These are just some of the costs they were able to identify. There are many more costs to evictions that are not in this list, but the national cost of an eviction right to counsel would be so much less than this, like in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 billion compared to $315 billion of damage that evictions do. So jurisdictions don't save money when they don't have a right to counsel. They just pay for it in different ways, much more expensive and much worse. And the cost savings, as I mentioned, are, the studies have shown they're significant. In Baltimore, it was a $5.7 million investment compared to a $35 million return. And the other studies that have been done have basically found the same thing. An investment in right to counsel pays many times over the return through all the avoided costs to government, city, county, state, all throughout the process. It's also worth noting, and I think, when we really try to emphasize that this is not an issue, this is an issue that the general public supports. Like across the political spectrum, right to counsel has gained that mainstream approval. So this is not something, where we're seeing that opposition come from one side of the aisle. It really is universal, the support for it. So where we are right now is 18 jurisdictions, 3 states and 15 cities. This is the list. As you can see, a lot of them passed in in 2021. The pandemic was definitely a motivator for some of that, but it wasn't just that. It was also, we had in 2021, we had the benefit of more data from New York City, from San Francisco, from Cleveland, and from Boulder that really helped. As that was coming out, places were seeing, oh, wow, this is really working. It's doing exactly what people said it was going to do, which is why we had, have had so many more passages. This year alone, we already have, I think, 7 or 8 states that have introduced legislation, statewide legislation, and we're expecting several more before this year is done. So this is going to be a very busy year at both the city and state level. Some of the data that was referred to earlier in New York City, 84% of the represented tenants are staying in their homes. From a systems change standpoint, filings are down 30%. That's really significant. That almost a third of the filings are not happening because their landlords are changing their behavior. They're maybe not filing a frivolous eviction. They're more inclined to negotiate now with their tenant rather than just immediately go to court, because before the cost of going to court was so minimal. It was basically like, if you go, you're going to get an eviction. It's going to be fast. That's not necessarily the case anymore. In San Francisco, again, the filing rate has decreased. Almost 60% of the tenants were able to stay in their homes. And then more recently, in Boulder and Kansas City and Cleveland, again, the same incredible results coming out, the eviction rate coming down significantly, tenants getting better access to rental assistance, and the tenants who did not want to remain in their units, like in Cleveland, which was 42% of the population of legal aid clients, they were able to achieve their goal of trying to transition the way that they wanted to. So that's really shows how legal aid is responsive to what the clients want. Like they're advocating for what their goals are. So this data is really huge, and it helps too that the courts are very slowly starting to come around on right to counsel. They were not necessarily hugely embracing of it at first, but in New York City, the judges actually testified on the record that it was actually making the courts more efficient and better. For them, this was not, contrary to maybe their initial impression. So as courts get comfortable with right to counsel, I think we'll see more of that judicial acceptance and endorsement of this concept. As I mentioned, we're working in a lot of places right now. This is just tiny sampling just to give you a sense of the geographical spread of where these efforts are, but really all over the country. And the list is much longer than this. This is just, again, a splash, just to get a sense of the kinds of places that are looking at this right now. The last thing I'll mention in closing is that we work with an entity called City Health that actually grades cities on their policies, on a package of policies, which evaluate them on various metrics. And right now, St. Louis has 6 medals: Affordable Housing Trust, Green Space, Healthy Food Purchasing, High Quality Pre-K, Safer Alcohol Sales, and Smoke-Free Indoor Air. It does not have a right to counsel medal, of course, because there is no right to counsel. So that's one medal it could add to it. It's growing total. And the medals you see up here, the 2, 6, and 6, those represent nationally the cities with right to counsel and where they have landed. Medal wise, the medals depend on, you have to have an enacted right to get a medal. If you don't, it does not get on the radar at all. Like funding alone will not get you a medal. you have to have an ordinance, and then what the ordinance exactly looks like depends on what metal you will ultimately get. And I'm happy to answer questions about that. So I know I talked very fast, but I know there are a lot of people that are here to talk today. So happy to answer questions from the committee now or in the future. And we're just thrilled to have this bill before you today, where it has proven to be an evidence-based success, and one that can really be transformative to communities and to tenant sense of empowerment and involvement in the process. So thank you so much.
John, thank you for that testimony. And I think I should have mentioned earlier, but we'll mention it now, that the city of St. Louis participated in an 8-week sprint along with John's organization and some other aligned organizations, including stakeholder representation and representation from the mayor's office. And so there's clearly a commitment to making this happen in St. Louis, and now obviously is a critical time post the moratoria in the country, including our own courts here in the city of St. Louis, and a lot of outside property owners buying up rental properties in the city of St. Louis makes it even more critical. And so happy to open it up to the committee for questions. Alderwoman Middlebrook, any questions for John? Alderwoman Rice.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing all that information. Yes, you did talk quickly, but it was great. The slides were very informative. And it's really great to know that we have the data to back this up. I practice law in another area where the right to counsel is not guaranteed. And so I understand very much the need for guidance when the courts are not set up for the average person to figure out, and knowing that we have the potential to offer folks some assistance on the front end, keep people housed, and all of the outcomes that are much better for people when they have a stable home. It's really great to have the data. I'm excited about this bill, and I'm hopeful that we can keep moving this thing forward. So thank you for your work, and thanks for coming to present to us.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderman Todd, any questions?
No question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman Page.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Great presentation, great information. I have only one question. Here in the St. Louis region, I have read some horror stories about evictions that have proceeded legally or illegally, and there's been no right of the tenant to obtain their materials, their furniture, their personal possessions from their apartment they were renting. Quite often, some of the stories that I've read, the people's personal stuff was either set out at the curb, thrown in a dumpster. At any rate, the tenant never had an opportunity to recover their materials. Does this right to counsel cover custody of personal effects, the right of tenants to retain their personal effects should the case proceed all the way to eviction and is not negotiated to them being able to stay in place?
So I'll let Alderwoman Ingrassia speak to the substance of the bill, but I'll just say that, for one, this is another issue where the right to counsel is so essential. That should never happen. Like that, basically, if the case is properly handled by an attorney, there should never be a situation where a person loses access to their belongings or where they're put out without their being able to arrange for them to be put in another location. And even, one of the things we sometimes see is cities will pass laws to try to protect tenants in those ways, but when they don't have a lawyer, it doesn't matter how good the law is because landlords will simply not follow it. And even the courts may not. And you really need that enforcement to basically make all of those other protective laws meaningful. So it's a great point. It is something we do see happen with representation far less often. And I'll let the Alderwoman speak to the substance of the bill.
Yes, Alderman Page, thank you so much for bringing that up. Illegal lockouts have been on my radar for quite a long time. In fact, our current clerk, Terry Kennedy, introduced legislation on this a number of years ago that I piggybacked on during the pandemic. And we're still not at the place we need to be in terms of dealing with the illegal lockout situation. So I'm happy to offline, not that I'm not trying to be transparent, but just in the making sure we have enough time for everyone tonight. Happy to talk to you more offline about that. And definitely agree that the right to counsel will be able to help in some situations, just as you mentioned.
Sure thing. Let's continue offline because I think this is an important matter. With that, I yield back.
Great. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. Alderman Grass, any questions?
Yeah, quickly, I agree. I want to piggyback on all the other comments to say that this is, I think, a really important bill. I think it'll do a lot of good. I actually think, I know it sounds weird, but I think the landlords are going to like it too. You know, I think it's just, you know, I represented, I've been on the other side of pro se folks before, and sometimes it's, you know, kind of hard to deal with them. And if you have a lawyer on the other side, you know, I think it just makes the whole thing work better. So I can totally see how cities that have implemented this, you know, even if they were nervous, that they all of a sudden realized that there were a lot of benefits that they weren't even expecting. Very quick question though, on your slides, I was very surprised. I mean, I thought, you know, 80%, I think it said, remains in their homes that are represented by counsel. And I guess I was just wondering about that stat. And is that like, you know, one just for that court appearance, or is that 1 month, 3 month, 6 month? Because yeah, I mean, that was a pretty impressive number.
Yeah, so, and I will say that, you know, some of those unit retention numbers are, you know, some places have very, very high retention rates because their law is very, very protective of tenants and provides a lot of ammunition for the attorneys to work with. In other places, those numbers may be lower, but again, even if unit retention cannot be achieved, there are many goals that the tenant can have that can still be pursued. And in fact, the tenant may not want to stay. So we don't, you know, necessarily focus on that statistic explicitly, but you know, you're correct that it's basically focusing on what happens in that initial encounter. If the tenant were to come back to legal aid because they faced another eviction the next month, then it would be a new case and new result. But these cases are not tracked over time to sort of see if they're not tracked specifically to see if they're like repeats. But anecdotally, what we do here is that the results, one way or the other, whether the tenant stays or not, the chance of the tenant winding up back in eviction court is far lower when they have representation, because the attorney can work with them to achieve a more permanent outcome for the best for them. You know, involving and doing things like helping them with financial planning, you know, things that can help them figure out like what is really viable for me to sort this problem in the long term, which they won't have that support when they go it alone. I also wanted to say to your point about the landlords is we do hear, again, you know, off the record, many of the landlords will tell us that they're okay with this. And, you know, they just don't necessarily want to say so in the press or in official testimony. We were very pleased that the Real Estate Board of New York actually submitted testimony in support of the right to counsel in New York State, the first entity to go on the record officially to say this is a good idea. And the landlord, I would say the landlord attorney bar is actually usually pretty supportive for exactly the reason you mentioned, which is that for them, dealing with pro se tenants is much more difficult than dealing with another attorney. So just wanted to echo those comments.
Great. No, I think it would be interesting. I know there was a part in this bill that we're going to kind of try to like keep track of data to see if it's successful. You know, I think it would be interesting to try to follow, you know, some of these cases to see if they end up back. You know, that'd just be good data, but nothing further. I appreciate what you're doing on this, and you know, access to justice is an important issue. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. And John, thanks for spending some time with us. It sounds like you have your hands full if there are 7 or 8 states and other localities also contemplating this legislation. So really appreciate your time. And
happy to, yes.
Yeah, if you could, before I forget, send me your presentation. I think a number of aldermen are interested in just having it for their records.
Absolutely happy to, and happy to be a resource for your counsel in the future if you need it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Karen Tokars, who's a professor at Washington University School of Law and also leads up the St. Louis Mediation Project. Karen, do you affirm that you will tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in your testimony?
I do.
All right, please proceed.
So good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. As Councilwoman Ingrassia just mentioned, I am the Nagel Professor of Public Interest Law and Policy at Washington University Law School. And I direct our negotiation and dispute resolution program, and I teach our housing and community development seminar. And I'm also co-founder and president of the St. Louis Mediation Project, which some of you may know provides free mediations in eviction and foreclosure cases in the courts and in the community. Like others here tonight, I think all of us should care about evictions, and all of us should support right to counsel for renters in St. Louis. Why do I say that? Three big reasons, some of which John Pollock just alluded to. First, because in St. Louis and the rest of the country, we are still facing the most severe housing crisis in history. This is not just a poor people housing crisis. This is an everybody housing crisis. The latest US data shows that almost half of American renter households are at risk for eviction. And everybody, at risk or not, bears the costs of evictions. Not just renters, but also landlords, the community, the economy, and the city as a whole. I'll just mention a few other points. Evictions, as some of you know, place enormous strain on our healthcare system, on schools, on courts, on local government. Data shows they have severe impacts on children with long-lasting health and education consequences, lower grades, delayed graduation. And as John Pollock mentioned, evictions have a distinct racial and gender inequity. Our St. Louis Mediation Project data for St. Louis for 2022, St. Louis region, shows that out of 1,500 households that we assisted with eviction issues in 2022, over 85% of renters being evicted are African-American. 65% of renters being evicted are women, and a significant number of renters being evicted are single parents. As he alluded to, evictions create increased costs for landlords. I think Michael Gross mentioned this question, especially smaller landlords, particularly through the court process, who pay attorney's fees, filing fees, sheriff's fees, as well as the lost income that comes from transitioning tenants and potential foreclosures. Evictions raise crime rates, they lower neighborhood stability, and they increase homelessness. They decrease property values, they impact the economy, and they clog the court system with outcomes that do not address the underlying housing problems. My second point would be eviction lawsuits filings are trending back up again. And we have to pay attention to this. After a significant drop in 20 and 21 due to the COVID-related eviction moratoria, eviction filing rates are back on the rise. And in my view, there are at least three factors that are precipitating this. One is, as I think almost everybody knows, federal rental assistance filings end next week, January 31st. And funding, safer funding, ends the end of February. Second, there are huge numbers of out-of-state investors coming into the St. Louis region, buying rental property on the cheap, failing to make repairs, evicting tenants, and then reselling property in disrepair. And third, the lack of affordable housing in the city. And not just the lack of enough rental units, but the lack of affordable housing. While median rent has increased massively in St. Louis City, like the rest of the country, household incomes have not kept that pace, and we are still facing inflation. So, taking all that into consideration. And my third point, specific to St. Louis city courts, the current court process, the eviction process, just does not work. Over the past 15 years, I have seen thousands of eviction cases in St. Louis, thousands. In St. Louis City Eviction Court, in divisions 27 and 28, we have provided mediation. We provided mediations every Friday morning for 10 years. the last 3 years, we've been providing free mediations in St. Louis County Eviction Court every other Tuesday afternoon. And we also provide it in the city and the county community outside of court. I'm not proud to say, but I think it's possible that I have seen more eviction cases than anybody in St. Louis. Our St. Louis mediation project currently sees 5 to 6 potential eviction cases per day. I'm not a tenant lawyer. I'm not a landlord lawyer. I'm a mediator. I handle mediations in state and federal court, primarily civil rights cases here and around the country. I've been elected to Best Mediators in America since 2010, one of 3 mediators in Missouri elected to the International Academy of Mediators. So how did I get so involved in evictions? Quick story. Over a decade ago, several St. Louis City Housing Court judges, some of my former students, approached me with their concerns about eviction court. They were greatly distressed about hugely overcrowded dockets, lack of lawyers for renters, and whether justice was actually being provided in the eviction courts. So I worked with a lawyer at Equal Housing and Opportunity Council to investigate the outcomes of eviction cases in St. Louis City Housing Court. And we looked at the court records for every landlord-tenant eviction case in St. Louis City Housing Court in 2012 that concluded with a trial or a default judgment. That year, 2012, there were 4,936 recorded case outcomes in housing court. Of those, 4,934 cases ended in favor of the landlord. Only 2 cases ended in favor of the tenant. The judges were right in their concerns. The court process was and still is totally unfair. It just doesn't work. The chances of renters succeeding in housing court were virtually 0, 2,500 to 1, statistically impossible, in no small part because very few renters had lawyers. This isn't justice in anybody's eyes. Not legal justice, not economic justice, not a win for anybody. Everybody, renters and landlords, as Councilman Grass mentioned, are losing faith in the courts, in the law. And as someone who's committed my life to preparing more lawyers, it's daunting. There was some talk back then, 15 years ago, well, 10 years ago, about the right to counsel, which I greatly endorsed, but there was very little traction in the city, the county, nor Jeff City, and it had not evolved as much in the country. But without right to counsel and with limited tenant lawyers available at our local nonprofit legal services providers, we strategized for a while with various judges and lawyers about what kind of intervention could there be in the court eviction process. And we looked at what some other places were beginning to do across the country. And apart from right to counsel, some places were, which was just being talked about, some places were experimenting with mandatory mediation before the filing of eviction cases, or mediations in the courthouse before the hearings were done. And thus is why the St. Louis Mediation Project was born, a joint project of the Washington University Law School Civil Rights and Mediation Clinic, which I direct, in conjunction with U.S. Arbitration and Mediation, which helped supply volunteer mediators, and Equal Housing and Opportunity Council. And as I said, we volunteered and provided free eviction mediations at the courthouse, in City Courthouse, not too far from where some of you are down at City Hall, in Division 27 to 28, every Friday morning for almost 10 years, with law students and volunteer lawyer mediators, using tables in the hallways provided by our St. Louis City Court Clerk, Tom Cloppinger, and which we did every Friday morning. And then, as I mentioned, 3 years ago, we moved to the county to help them develop it. And in the past 2 years, we've expanded through federal funding into the St. Louis City and county communities to try a whole new approach, which is providing mediations before the filing of eviction cases, working directly with landlords such as McCormick Barron, Murphy Park, Renaissance Place, Southwest Crossings, which is now Fountains at Carondelet, Canfield Green, is now Pleasant View Gardens, and others, which has turned out to be a big win for everybody. Last year, in 2022, as I indicated earlier, the mediation project assisted almost 1,500 households in the St. Louis region. Over 1,300 of which were with landlords and renters before the filing of an eviction lawsuit, which is 5 to 6 eviction cases per day. But federal funds for renters is ending and likely for providers also being eliminated. And our mediation project will most likely revert to doing just in-court mediations where we touch less than 5% of the filed eviction cases. And our settlement success will likely fall some due to the lack of rental assistance. But what I learned from our experience over all these years and from multiple conferences and reports from the White House, the Department of Justice, American Bar Association on eviction prevention is while mediations help to a limited extent, they do not level the playing field. Not all parties agree to mediate, not all parties stick to agreement. Most landlords have attorneys, most renters don't, and most programs like ours can only do a very small part of the dockets. So studies are beginning to show, as John Pollock mentioned, that cities actually gain through right to counsel, reduced eviction court filings, reduced homelessness, and increased housing stability. Some cities have already found that it not only stabilizes housing, but it's actually cost effective, where cities are recouping their program costs in associated savings on other programs, particularly related to housing and crime. So am I really proud of what we've done and what we do through the mediation project over these many years? Yeah, of course. But I'll be the first to say, mediation is not a big enough solution to address the eviction crisis in St. Louis City, and it's not sustainable. We need a bigger, better structural solution. And by far, the most beneficial approach for all the parties, including the city, is right to counsel. It's being proven over and over again across the country to be a win-win-win for all concerned. Now's the time for St. Louis City to move forward, like Kansas City and other cities in the country, many with both federal funds and general revenue. As some of my friends say, if Kansas City can do it, we can do it. Is it a simple endeavor? No. Might it need to be developed incrementally? Yes. But evictions are a major crisis in St. Louis City, and we can't ignore it. We have to all come together. Every piece of city government, local legal services, and law school clinics, everybody to strategize ways to provide better protections for renters, including right to counsel, and in the end, to reduce evictions. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer questions later. I know there are a lot of people who need to speak. I can't say enough how much I am grateful to the council people on this committee, the alder people on this committee, including Alderwoman Christine Ingrassia, for all of your efforts trying to deal with this really, really, really serious public issue. I applaud you for taking this on, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I think it's probably a good time to mention that a number of us have been working on right to counsel. I know the board bill got introduced pretty quickly and maybe surprisingly based on our inability to extend the date to introduce board bills, but a number of us in the community have been working on this literally since very close to March of 2020. So I will thank you again for your testimony. I will open it up to the committee for questions. Alderwoman Middlebrook, do you have any questions? Alderwoman Rice.
I don't have any questions. Just thank you, Karen, for your work and for being here to talk with us about it tonight. Yeah, you covered it pretty thoroughly, so I'm pretty set, I think. But actually, Madam Clerk, if you would add my name as a co-sponsor too, I meant to do that earlier. Just we're committed to try to get this done. So thank you.
Noted.
Thank you so much, Alderwoman, for your support. Alderman Todd.
I don't have any question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure. Alderman Page.
In the interest of time, I'll be very brief. I will just say that with both presentations, I'm just blown away with the scope and scale of this issue of the eviction phenomenon, if you will. we all know it's a problem, but I just had no idea of the scale. Ms., and I assume Dr. Tokars?
Yes,
Yes. I just have a very quick question. I was paying very close attention during your presentation, and I noticed you said you only get about 5% of the total caseload into mediation. Did I recall that correctly?
you did.
I'm curious to know, what is the success rate of that, of those cases that go to mediation?
Great question. And almost from the beginning, our success rate is approximately a 70% settlement rate in mediations. And of those, over 50% stick. The parties comply with their settlements, and so there are no evictions going forward in those cases. It's complicated. We have one of the biggest mediation programs probably in the country, and until the federal funds 2 years ago, it was totally volunteer. There are about 20 people, mediators, plus every semester, approximately 10 to 12 students. And even with that, we can't handle that many cases. There's just thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, there's just cases. And it doesn't totally solve the problem for the majority of cases where the landlords have attorneys, which is the majority of all cases. Most of them don't want to mediate. They know the numbers I showed you, that they have a 99% right chance of winning if they go to court. So why do they want to mediate? It's becoming more so, as I say, people in the community now willing to do it, but that's only recent. And it's a great approach. I'm a big fan of mediation. I've been doing it for 25 years, almost 30 years, but it just doesn't answer this huge underlying structural problem. You shouldn't have a court. There shouldn't be a court in this country where the chances for one side winning are 2,500 to 1. It's just not justice.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, I would be honored to have my name added as a co-sponsor of this bill. And with that, I yield back.
So noted.
Thank you so much, Alderman Page. I appreciate the support and your illustration of how critically important this is, not just in St. Louis, but I think nationally at this point in time. Alderman Gross, do you have any questions?
No questions. I appreciate the work you're doing. It's nice to see you. And if you guys could, I would also be honored to be added as a co-sponsor to this bill, if I could be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Professor Tokars, thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Kennard Williams with Action St. Louis. Are you with us, Kennard?
I am. Thank you, Alderwoman.
Great. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. Please proceed.
Good evening, members of the Health and Human Services Committee. Ever since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Action St. Louis has been responding to the looming eviction crisis and its impact on renters all across the city, and particularly North St. Louis. From outreaching tenants who needed to certify their eligibility for the federal eviction moratorium in 2020, to directly working with the city to notify renters about the rental assistance program in 2021, contacting over 800 people facing eviction, to building out our We the Tenants campaign with renters from all over the region last year. Our organization has remained steadfast in our commitment with working to keep people in their communities, and this year Action St. Louis's We the Tenants campaign has released a Right to Counsel toolkit with information about evictions in St. Louis and how tenants' right to counsel works, and statistics from multiple cities across the country that speak to the benefits of the implementation of a tenant's right to counsel program. These will be made available to members of the committee. The crisis that is facing our city is not colorblind, nor are its impacts means tested. An estimated 55% of St. Louis's housing units are renter occupied. Of that, almost 40% of renters reported their rent as 35% or more of their household income. On top of the income disparities that currently exist along racial lines in our region, parallel to that lies the fact that Black people in St. Louis are disproportionately represented amongst eviction filings, as you all have heard multiple times from other presenters here tonight. According to the Princeton Eviction Lab, of the 1,210 evictions filed in December 2022, 55% were in majority Black neighborhoods, while 33% were in majority white neighborhoods. These numbers are also compounded with scores of illegal evictions that occur all over the city, but are not necessarily documented and enforced against. The impact of evictions is felt by many for years to come. Evictions have the power to completely upend and stop a family's upward economic mobility and has direct impact on the educational outcomes of children. After being evicted, an eviction judgment stays on tenants' records for years and limits access to housing and begins to dictate where people can live and who will rent to them. School-age children are impacted by eviction by no longer being able to access educational opportunities in the same district and potentially disrupting needed student services such as counseling, meals, and special education support. The current lack of protections and access to legal representation creates a perfect storm that leaves renters in St. Louis vulnerable to hazardous and oftentimes illegal conditions. In a survey sample of 150 renters in St. Louis, 51% indicated they were experiencing issues with leaks, while another 48% indicated problems with mold in their homes, 46% reporting serious structural issues, and 80% reporting issues with pests. When polled on landlord responsiveness to conditions issues, 58.9% of renters said that their current landlord or property management company is not responsive. Lower income renters with any eviction history on their record are more likely to be subjected to living in substandard housing conditions because of an eviction on their record and face difficulty finding affordable housing for which they qualify for. In many cases, seeking abatement for issues has resulted in landlords and property management companies weaponizing evictions against tenants stuck in such uneven power dynamics as they attempt to get issues resolved, and in some cases, landlords resorting to illegal lockouts. While other tenants face eviction due to unmaintained properties not being legally inhabitable and having no recourse due to inability to access representation following eviction due to the conditions. The need for a strong comprehensive tenants right to counsel program is clear. The benefits of a right to counsel program in St. Louis are immense. Other cities such as New York saw 84% of tenants able to remain in their home. San Francisco saw a 10% drop in filings. Kansas City saw a 70% decrease in the first 3 months. Tenants benefit from the help of legal counsel, which not only increases their ability to be represented in court, but also results in better legal outcomes for tenants by avoiding the harmful effects of receiving a judgment against them. But also the city of St. Louis stands to benefit from operating such a program by saving funds that would otherwise have to go towards increased shelter costs, rehousing support, and medical costs. Implementing right to counsel policies also keep people from our communities in our communities by easing the harmful effects of displacement caused by gentrification as development across the city increases. Lastly, right to counsel policies increase the power and overall economic ability of families to thrive in St. Louis. Action St. Louis stands wholeheartedly in support of Board Bill 180 and urges the Health and Human Services Committee to pass Board Bill 180 out of committee for the many renters and constituents across the city of St. Louis.
Kennard, thank you so much. I know that you spend a lot of your time every single day working with the very people that we are going to hear from, I think, momentarily, but having your perspective is just key. And thank you so much for the work you do to make sure that I think one of the reasons we paused for so long in moving forward with the right to counsel is that organizations like Action St. Louis had the ability to interact with tenants to make sure this was something that they thought was a priority, and it's obviously been identified as a priority. And so again, just appreciate all of your work and your testimony tonight. And I will open it up to the committee members for questions for Kennard. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
No questions, just thank you so much for your work and for being here tonight.
Alderman Todd.
I don't have any questions, but thank you for your work.
Alderman Page.
No questions. I'd just like to thank Mr. Williams for his advocacy.
And Alderman Gross, any questions or comments?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again, Kennard. Next up, we have Lee Camp with Arch City Defenders.
Am I supposed to swear in?
Oh, gosh, yes, thank you for reminding me of that. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you, Alderwoman Ingrassia, for the opportunity to speak tonight on this issue. My name is Lee Camp. I'm a senior staff attorney with Arch City Defenders here in St. Louis. You've heard from a couple of different lawyers tonight, and I'll send comments out to the Alderwoman and the committee woman to circulate. So I'll try to be brief and touch on things different. And I bring a different perspective to this tonight because I am a tenants attorney. For the past 8 years, I've represented hundreds of families facing eviction in the St. Louis region. I've done that at every level of the courts, from the low-level eviction courts to the Missouri Supreme Court, and advocated for their rights in federal court as well. And while you may be familiar with Arch City, generally, you may wonder why someone like me works here at a more traditional civil rights organization. For the past 14 years, we've been involved and worked with families that face housing precarity. We are one of those legal services providers that provides free legal services to families that are in hardship, facing the loss of their homes in the courts. And that is something that I've done day in and day out with my colleagues, again, for the past 8 years, and 6 of those here at Arch City. Evictions themselves should be a central part of any conversation we're having around affordable housing, around public health, public safety, homelessness. All of those issues are intertwined here. Because this bill is focused so heavily on the legal intervention piece, I'm going to speak a little bit about the courts as they look for our neighbors, what people actually encounter when they find themselves in eviction courts here in the city. Evictions themselves are really easy to file. They are mandated by state law that allows a landlord to summarily recover their property when a tenant is either behind on rent or they've terminated their tenancy for a variety of reasons. They're really easy to file. The moment that you're behind any amount of money in rent after the rent is due, you can be sued for an eviction case. I have personally seen cases and represented families in subsidized housing cases that will be over amounts of less than a couple $100s. And of course, the stakes are high when we're talking about removing someone's home for a pretty negligible amount of money. And then I think there's a misconception around how fast evictions move. We've all kind of nodded at the fact that they're pretty swift proceedings and that you can actually lose your home in weeks, we've talked about tonight. But there's this misconception that you kind of get a 30-day notice and that people can catch up on their rent when things are going wrong. And that's just not the case. Under Missouri law, you can be sued immediately. There is no notice period there if you're behind on rent. And while I'd love to see that in law, it's just not true. When you're behind, you can be sued and drug into an eviction court. And there's also a misconception that, the only people that show up in eviction court are those that owe money, and that these are pretty open and shut cases. To John's point, that is a pervasive thought that is kind of really directed the narrative here for years, but it's just not true. Evictions are filed for a variety of reasons, and landlords every day in our community terminate the tenancies of tenants. They send them notice to end their lease, and then when the tenant doesn't move out or is unable to move out because circumstances that exist are there, they find themselves in eviction court as well. And some people do this as a cost of doing business. It's sometimes easier and cheaper to remove a tenant from your home if you have serious conditions problems that need to be remedied and the tenant's starting to raise concerns about those issues. We've heard about the influx of kind of corporate landlords and out-of-state landlords. As we see those players move into our town and our region, we also see turnover in kind of tenant populations. Maybe they want to do rehabilitation on the multifamily properties, or now we see a lot of single family homes being bought by these same companies, and they may want to move people out for a variety of reasons. That can also end a tenant up in the eviction process. And once you get there, it really is a rocket type experience. Tenants are served with a notice. In Missouri, that can be up to as little as 5 days notice that you need to be in court to represent yourself and defend this case. And when the tenants actually can't go to court, maybe they have to work or they need to arrange childcare, there's just circumstances that don't allow them to be there, a default judgment can be entered against them for not appearing and participating in these proceedings. The entry of a default judgment, again, it's kind of a non-appearance judgment, can lead to you losing your home in as soon as 10 days after that judgment is entered. That's how fast the process can play out. 15 days notice, if you can't make it to court, could lead to the loss of your home. But that's not what happens every day. While certainly there are people that can't show up to court, every day families in this city are dragged into the 8th floor of the circuit courts right across from City Hall, in between those two divisions that Professor Tokar's talked about, divisions 27 and 28, that are cram-packed with people. And when the families arrive, almost certainly without an attorney, they find themselves as a name on a list of probably 100 other cases, dealing with everything from hospital debt to little contractual disputes that companies may have or individuals may have. But the tenant is there with different stakes. They're there because their housing is on the line. So everything is on the line to them. And after they hear their name called, amongst the myriad of cases that are going on, they generally, have the opportunity to go meet with an attorney for their landlord. 90% of the landlords are represented. Generally in this country, it's about 70 to 80% here in the city of St. Louis that are represented. And they're there with a purpose, right? They are there to advocate for their client and have responsibilities to do that. And so the tenants will go meet with these individuals in the hallway, kind of a chaotic scene, if you can imagine 200 people converging and trying to talk to 6, 7 people that represent these different landlords. And while they're there doing so, the tenants may start to raise defenses to their cases or show receipts that they had made payments or state, I'm behind a little. I just need to work out a payment plan. And at that point, it's truly up to the attorney for the landlord to decide which way the case may go from there. If they, have some discretion from their client to work out an agreement, maybe that happens. A lot of times it just doesn't, though. And a lot of those agreements are generally reduced to writing in some form of a judgment, what's known as a consent judgment, which at the end of the day is a judgment against that person that will enter the court records and become a public record seen by many, as we'll talk about here in a moment. There are also another group of people that choose to forego those conversations. Those individuals that say, hey, I've been living in deplorable conditions. I'm ready to go tell the judge what's going on. When that happens, their case is generally set for trial approximately 1 week out in the city of St. Louis. And if it's a Friday docket where both parties are unrepresented, they have the trial right there. But generally it'll be about a week out because most parties are represented, landlords are represented by attorneys. And in that week, this unrepresented tenant is expected to properly and in compliance with court rules, file pleadings, prepare evidence for a trial. They could conduct some discovery and try to see what evidence the landlord has, but again, have to go through proper court proceedings to do so. And then they have to conduct a trial against an advocate who's been trained to do so, an attorney who knows how to do these cases. It is kind of a chaotic scene. To Alderman Gross's point, it's sometimes more helpful to actually have an attorney in this picture because of this. But if a tenant gets that far down the road and they're going to trial, certainly they will hit roadblocks as an attorney for the landlord will raise legal defenses and procedural defenses to all of the tenants' kind of, points that they're trying to raise here. And so as we heard earlier tonight, universally, when someone attempts to represent themselves at trial and goes that route, the judgment is entered in favor of the landlord, almost certainly because of all these procedural and legal roadblocks that generally people just can't navigate. And we should make, no bones about it. Our courts are not set up for the general public to navigate. They are set up for legal advocates to navigate through. And a tenant trying to do that is just a difficult process. And so what we see out of this is generally the entry of a judgment against someone in a matter of weeks. We see tenants walk into courts housed and they walk out evicted. And the outcome of those proceedings that, again, happen in such a short period of time can really send renters into a just absolute descendants of poverty. The judgment, as I've mentioned, hits the court records, and that's really where the first ball starts to roll here. A lot of people think The eviction is kind of the period on the end of the sentence. That's the end of the dispute. And that's the end of the problems for the parties. But it's simply just not true. The judgment's entered. The tenant has 10 days to decide what they're going to do. Alderman Page brought up the point about what about the possessions in the property that someone has. They may choose to move from that home and do their best to try to remove those belongings, but if they can't get them out, they may be abandoned, or maybe they can't communicate with their landlord about getting access back to the home to recover that property that they've bought. Another just kind of problem that happens here, and really where the problems start for the tenants long term, is as the judgment hits the court records. Our court records in Missouri are public record, and they become actually more transparent this year, which will allow individuals like credit screening companies and landlord screening companies, the general public at large, to see more details about these judgments. When the person was evicted, if there's any facts underlying that eviction case, and then the amount of rental arrears they may owe will become public. It will become a mark that will end up on someone's credit and their rental records as they move forward. And in our world, we call this a Scarlet E. It is something that tracks with someone as they try to move forward. And so if you're that person facing the loss of your home in 10 days, and you're not ready to just accept a reality of true homelessness, you might try to scramble to find another place to live. This is where the Scarlet E comes in. The eviction itself, generally that record will move people into a type of secondary market. This happens every day in the city of St. Louis, that people are moved from a rental market that was a little bit better housing, maybe affordable to them at the time, into a market that is more expensive for that family, that generally has substandard housing conditions, that's away from the more opportunity areas in our town, generally less reliable transportation opportunities. Children in the household are uprooted from their school systems, or at least have interruptions in their education. And that's where problems start. For families that find themselves going through this cycle over and over, ultimately homelessness does become the reality for them. And I think it's something no one wants to talk about, but evictions themselves absolutely lead to homelessness. And that problem becomes inextricably intertwined with the reality of the eviction crisis and the problems that we're facing today. With this grim reality, you've heard from a couple of attorneys tonight, and I think it certainly begs a question. So why throw attorneys at this to fix it? Shouldn't we explore a multitude of different resources? And I'm not here to say that having lawyers is some sort of silver bullet to resolving all of the affordable housing problems that we have in our community and the dilemmas that we face of choices of limited resources every day. But I am here to echo firsthand the kind of data that you heard from John Pollock about the results that attorneys can have in these cases, and talk about the way that we could fill the gap. We know mitigation efforts, and make no doubt that a right to counsel is a mitigation effort, again, not a solution to this problem, but we know those mitigation efforts are having an impact. We've heard about the eviction moratoriums tonight. We had those at the local and federal levels. They're no longer in place, but they were. We've heard about unprecedented federal rental assistance that was administered here at the city and through the state of Missouri. The applications for that funding stop in 5 days. We will no longer have those on the table, but we've seen the results of interventions to mitigate evictions. Last year, there were approximately 3,000 eviction filings here in the city of St. Louis. Pre-pandemic, we saw about 6,000. That is great. We want to see those numbers go down, but I think we have to ask ourselves, what about the 3,000 families that found themselves in eviction court last year? And with these protections now lapsing and funding depleted to provide additional rental assistance, where do lawyers come in? Well, we help fill the gap at this point in an ever-evolving housing landscape. When attorneys are involved in the picture, we truly can lead to keeping people housed in the homes that they're in. If this is a situation of getting someone caught up on rent, or if there are issues with the lawsuits that have been filed, there are procedural things that the landlords must equally follow too. We can pinpoint those. We can do discovery to discover what may be wrong with the books, with the numbers that are in these legal filings that hit our courts every day. We can succeed at trial. We may not always do that, but we can, and we can certainly give that individual a fighting chance to see a semblance of justice in these proceedings. And then there are times that settlements happen where we ultimately, we will talk to our clients and they'll be ready to move from the home for a variety of different reasons. We can help work with the family to figure out what's an amicable timeline that we can get the other side to agree to that results in everyone walking away, no eviction judgment hitting the record, again, starting that kind of cycle of poverty, cut out that step, and, really answer some of these other things that hang out there, the ancillary issues like recovery of property, like if someone needs to pay back rental amounts on top of their current rent, how much that will be every month. And we put pen to paper to draw up those agreements for those families. So we even see success in the settlement area and see successes when families leave these homes that they don't stay in, that help them avoid ultimate homelessness in our community, which is an extreme cost and an extreme problem. That's another conversation for a different day. I think by intervening at this judicial stage of housing instability, we not only help the families, and we've heard about some of the costs this will concretely save this community in the homelessness space, general neighborhood stability will increase. We can unpack those things all day, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge those cost savings. But I think that this board bill in particular is an absolute signal to tenants here in the city of St. Louis that we value them the same as any of our other neighbors and all other St. Louisans. This is not just an issue of cost savings, but this is truly a step forward for racial justice and human rights in this city. We've heard tons about the racial disparities tonight, the problem that we see here. We see the same problem. I've seen it firsthand in those courtrooms, in those hallways, riding the elevators up to represent people in these courts. And I've seen it across the homelessness space here in the city of St. Louis as well. It's no coincidence that those populations reflect one another. And it's borne out really in data that we have here in the community. It's borne out in some own data that the city of St. Louis has. In 2018, the city of St. Louis, in its own commission equity indicators report, tried to quantify different places that we had major inequities throughout, our city. And of course, it's no surprise that eviction showed up even in that report. And certainly at that time, as it will today, the data showed renters living in majority Black census tracts are twice as likely to face eviction than those living elsewhere. And we've seen some of these same things in reports that our city has been a part of.
Mr. Camp, I apologize.
Yeah, out of time.
Yes, and your testimony has been incredibly important. I just want to be cognizant of the fact that we have a number of members from the public who would also like to testify. I want to make sure that committee members, some of whom have to leave early, are able to ask you questions. Is that okay? I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay, I appreciate it. Do any of the members of the committee have questions for Lee before we move on?
Yeah, just really quickly. If there's more that you want to share with us, also, if you've got an outline written up or whatever, send that to us as well. Thank you for your experience in the area. If a question about eviction filing is on records, is that you talked about if the eviction is finalized, then that for sure goes on records. If an eviction is filed, is that a findable record by these searches as well?
Yeah, you can certainly find those records, and we've seen that multiple times. However, they're much easier to dispute if an eviction is filed against you, but the case was never actually resulted in a judgment or some sort of debt being declared owed by that individual. It's easier to dispute that and have it removed from credit reports.
Sure. Okay. So that's something just to, I guess, flag going forward as well. I know we've talked about that before, and I thank you also for highlighting that with an attorney, you're able to find what's in the client's best interest, what is in their best interest for themselves, right? That they're dictating do I want to stay? Do I want to go? And helping them find the right route to that. I think that's incredibly valuable to point out that no two cases are going to be exactly the same. And that's why having a real human attorney sitting with them is so important, that you're able to counsel them what their options are and then help them actually achieve what it is that they want for themselves. So thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony and for all of your work on this. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Any other members of the committee have questions or comments for Lee? Great. Thank you so much for your time and your partnership. You've been on those housing calls since March of 2020, and appreciate your expertise and insight. Now we are moving on to public testimony. Again, thank you so much to all of you for being here. I apologize that if we had inordinate and unending amounts of time, I would not give you a time restriction, but just asking if possible for you to, we're going to cut off at 2 minutes, but if for some reason you feel like you can be more concise than that, to offer more time to other folks, I just want to make sure that we are able to get through as many, to get through everyone who wants to testify before people on the committee start dropping off. And I will give
Ms.
you.
Ingrassia?
Yes.
Chair Ingrassia, we have Ms. Val Joyner here, who was.
Yes. She's up next. Yeah. Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. So Val from the Housing Authority, you have 2 minutes to speak, and then we will allow members of the committee to ask questions. So do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening all. My name is Val Joyner, and I'm the spokesperson for the St. Louis Housing Authority. Our Executive Director, Alana Green, she sends her regrets, as today's meeting, it coincides with our monthly Board of Commissioners meeting. Changing the landlord-tenant power imbalance helps to advance the mission of subsidized housing programs, including those offered through the St. Louis Housing Authority. Eviction curtails access to safe, affordable housing and perpetuates the cycle of poverty for generations. Effective legal representation for tenants facing eviction is critical to maintaining housing security and avoiding the negative impacts of eviction. Participants in the Housing Choice Voucher Program, commonly referred to as the Section 8 program, are particularly vulnerable because not only are they at risk of losing housing, but also because they are at risk of losing their federal assistance per HUD guideline. Because of this, the St. Louis Housing Authority requests that the board bill also cover those individuals who are participants in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much for being here. I think it's a powerful statement that the Housing Authority in St. Louis is in support of this legislation. I think that there have been a number of other places where the Housing Authority was not so supportive, and it's illustrative of the fact that we're working well together, and happy to open it up to the committee members for any questions they might have for Val or comments. Great. Ms. Joyner, thank you so much for spending some of your evening with us. I really appreciate you being here and also the position of the Housing Authority. So please pass that along to Alana. Next up, we have Nashelle Harris. Nashelle, have you been able to stay on? Great. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Great. Please proceed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Nashelle Harris, and I'm here representing Empower Missouri. We're a statewide organization founded in 1901 to advocate for the well-being of Missouris throughout our state through civic leadership, education, and research. As part of our work, we organize a statewide affordable housing coalition with the goal of ending homelessness in Missouri. Many of our coalition members call St. Louis home and work together towards this goal, at making this goal a reality for our neighbors in the city. As an organization, we are grateful for you all for sponsoring Board Bill 180. So as been discussed, evictions are a leading cause of homelessness. Research shows that shelters and other emergency services needed to respond to homelessness cost significantly more than preventative programs like Tenants' Right to Counsel. An analysis in Baltimore found that $1 invested in tenant right to counsel could save the city an estimated $3.06 on eviction-related services like emergency shelters and school transportation, which is consistent with studies in other cities like Kansas City and Los Angeles. But beyond forcing families out of their homes, evictions are also incredibly traumatizing and destabilizing events that can throw individuals, families, and communities into cycles of loss, which is why we believe that passing tenants' right to counsel is a crucial step for city renters. Tenants with full representation during an eviction case have been found to be over 4 times more likely to stay in their homes and 4 times less likely to enter a shelter than those without full representation. Providing legal counsel, as mentioned, is also a deterrent for landlords who would otherwise harass their tenants, file frivolous lawsuits, deny services and repairs, or charge illegal rents. Attorney representation for both landlords and tenants also increases settlement rates. This has the additional benefit of reducing already overloaded court dockets, thus allowing judges to oversee and ensure more accurate and fair outcomes for the cases that do progress to a formal hearing. Finally, to end this quickly, as a renter, I know firsthand what a difference a right to counsel can make. In the past, I've endured landlord harassment, substandard living conditions, and lost out on at least $1,000 in dubious charges and illegally withheld deposits, because I knew that challenging my landlord could lead to an eviction filing that I would almost certainly lose because there was no way I could afford an attorney. So on behalf of Empower Missouri and as a St. Louis City resident and renter, I do urge this committee to pass Board Bill 180 out of their committee. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Nichelle. Really appreciate you being here this evening. Nicholas Viola, are you on? Yeah, thank you. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, in 2016, I was living in the 18th ward, and I was renting from an individual landlord who sold the house and gave us 90 days notice. Apparently that wasn't even legally required, according to Lee Camp. But after 60 days, the new owner came up the stairs into my room where I was sleeping undressed and demanded I vacate, apparently misinformed about the move out date, and immediately threatened police intervention. I kept calm and corrected him on the timeline of the move out, which fortunately he did double check and accept, but I was made heavily aware of my vulnerability. And had he decided to double down, I would have been at a loss for proper representation and potentially unhoused while still navigating my next move in without a basis of operations or any way to really store and change out my various work tools. I'm currently renting in the 5th ward from a corporate property owner, Odin Properties, based in Philadelphia, which comes with its own host of insecurities. For instance, the month before signing the lease, I was made to pay a full deposit from a strange third-party financial company. I couldn't really figure out what the case was there, and they did not sign a lease immediately after me paying the deposit, and the rent was increased twice in that window, but between the deposit and the lease. Neighbors have spoken of ledger disputes with this company where rent charges accidentally get doubled. And
yes, I apologize. Your time
sure.
is up. Can you just make one quick closing statement?
Sure. These cases really showed me that eviction, the shadow of eviction can hang over anyone, and lack of legal representation can leave you very vulnerable. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Michael Browning, are
Thanks
you?
so much.
I don't see Michael on my screen. Does anyone else see him? Okay. Carissa Gilman Hernandez, do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. My name is Carissa Gilman Hernandez. I am the Democratic Committee Woman of the Fighting 15th Ward. And I'm here to show support for this board bill, Board Bill 180, from the perspective of someone whose grandfather was a longtime landlord. He also property managed, I think, up to about 20 properties. And the 3 houses that he owned were paid for by renters. And I grew up with countless stories of renters who left in the middle of the night, who he had to evict, ones that would trash things, whatever, all you have it. I'm sure, anyway. But he kept those properties. The value of those properties stayed long after those renters left. And every renter who paid $1 to my grandfather, sorry, I didn't think I'd get emotional, but I am. They paid for his end of life care so that he could pass away with the dignity he deserved, because we sold those houses and the value in them was so much more than any renter could have taken out of them when they went. And let's just say a alderman claimed to be owed $12,000 on a house. I assure you that alderman has more than $12,000 of value in that home. And one day they will have that value and their family will be better off for it. But the renters do not have that, and they deserve more protections because of it. And so I fully support this board bill from the perspective of somebody who has benefited from the rent paid. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Carissa Kaz. I don't see Carissa.
I don't either.
Hey, she's
Okay.
on the screen.
They're sharing canards.
Okay, sorry, I don't have, yeah, thank you. Kennard, are you ready to,
Good to go.
and did I pronounce Carissa's name correctly?
Yes, my first name, yes.
Okay, how do you pronounce your last name?
So hello, everyone. My
Oh, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last?
Here representing Action St. Louis for the passing of the Right to Counsel Bill BB 180. If you want to make America great again, this is where we can start. For 2.5 years, we've watched renters be treated like they don't matter to the system of American housing. We treat housing like it's a choice and not a right of every person that fights to have it. Housing is a lifestyle, a need, a privilege, but it should not be an option. I believe we need to have a housing system that works for the people and the landlords. We need to pass this bill to see this thing through to better changes made in our housing system. Who knows what positive changes this will create for housing for years to come, benefiting the tenants and the landlords alike. My sister and I, like many African American women, have very few options for well-maintained, livable, affordable housing. Because of the disability considerations, income considerations, transportation considerations, and many other considerations we have to make every time we look for an apartment due to our circumstances, we are left many times with very little or very poor choices for rental agreements that fit our basic needs. Some of the things I have personally dealt with while renting are: my rent was more than half of my income for the month. My landlord would charge me for things in my apartment that broke down. I had old and outdated appliances that required constant maintenance. I was constantly having to have major and minor things fixed in my apartment. There were bug problems and they have little to no pest control. Apartment grounds were always filled with litter and apartments were not maintained well from the outside and from the inside. Office staff were often rude to me, and I didn't have a way to file complaints to get my voice heard. These types of living conditions are normal to me and people like me, but it doesn't have to be. This is what the bill hopes to change. I do not look at my sister as less than because of where she was born or the skin she was born into, and I know she sees the same with me. With the passing of Bill BB 180, I see times like this as an opportunity to give us and people like us a change in our normal. A brighter future filled with circumstances we can make the most from, even when things don't always go as planned, such as evictions. Passing the Tenants' Right to Counsel Bill BB 180 will finally give tenants and landlords the opportunity to create a system that is of the future and not of the past. Change is forever. Ask yourself, is this the change you want to see in our world? If so, let's start with Bill BB 180. Thank you for your time and consideration on this matter.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. If I mispronounce anyone's name, please feel free to correct me. I'm doing my best to make sure that I'm saying everyone's name correctly. It drives me a little bit crazy when people don't say my name the right way. I think Josh Lawrence submitted written testimony. I don't see him on here. So I think we can move on to Kenny Dolan if Kenny is on.
Hi, I'm here.
All right, Kenny, do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed.
Okay. I support 180 because housing is one of the most important rights of any person anywhere. It is easy for governmental officials to ignore vulnerable people and situations behind ivory walls and data points, while mutual aid and other service-driven organizations scramble to fill in the holes that city policy does not cover. The development of increased housing rights for tenants will help protect thousands of St. Louis citizens from dangers that are too dangerous and easy to separate from. Preventionary care is the most important with complex issues such as housing, and this bill would be a great step. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and spending some time with us this evening. Is KB Doman on?
Yes, hello.
KB, oh, there you are on video. Thank you. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed.
Hello, my name is KB Doman, and I live in St. Louis on the 3600 block of Wyoming. As a member of Tent Mission STL, an organization that supports unhoused community members, I am strongly in support of Board Bill 180, Right to Counsel. Many unhoused individuals in St. Louis would not be living outside today if there had been a right to counsel in St. Louis when they lost their home. For instance, I know one man with 6 attempted evictions on his record, 4 of which had been filed against him by the same landlord at different points, in retaliation for bringing up severe repair issues in his home. Unfortunately, attempted evictions still show up on people's records even when they are dismissed. The man has not been able to find housing since due to his eviction record and is still living outside today. Similarly, throughout my time working with unhoused individuals, I've seen many people find housing and move indoors, only to be back outside a few months later due to the terrible conditions of the rented apartments. Families and individuals who are first excited about their new home frequently report holes in the walls and ceilings, severe mold, broken furnaces and ACs, bed bugs, rats, and more. They are also forced to move due to conditions or threatened with evictions when they cause issues by asking for repairs. Due to the low-income housing shortage in St. Louis, there's often nowhere else to go. Right to Counsel would help tenants get the repairs they need and reduce the harms of retaliatory and evictions. I believe it would be an important step in the right direction towards equity and accountability. I strongly support the board bill and urge the committee to as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, KB, and for your work with Tent Mission. It's appreciated. Is Liam on? I don't see Liam, so we'll move to Julia Ho. Is Julia on?
Hey, yes, I'm here.
Hi, Julia. Nice to see you. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Julia Ho. I have been a St. Louis City resident for 12 years, and I live on the 2800 block of Lemp Avenue. I won't repeat what other folks have said. I definitely agree with all of the support, all the reasons why you should support this bill. I just want to say, you know, as a real estate agent, as a real estate investor, as a landlord myself, and as a community organizer, I see no reason not to pass Right to Counsel. I got into real estate because my family had been involved in the business in Texas for many years, and we were always, you know, taught to treat tenants, you know, as if they're family, and also never rent anywhere that you would never live. And that's just not the case in St. Louis. And so we can't rely on the goodwill of landlords to provide safe housing for everybody. We need systemic solutions like Right to Counsel to hold landlords accountable and to keep them from exploiting our tenants. So, and I'll just add to that and say, as my experience as a community organizer, helping to start St. Louis Mutual Aid in the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020,
Since then, mutual aid has gotten 423 calls or requests for help navigating tenant landlord issues since March of 2020. And that's just a small fraction of the people that have reached out to us and have been anywhere on the spectrum of homelessness, whether that is facing eviction or actually on the streets themselves. So we have definitely seen our fair share and wish that there were more resources available for the people who come to mutual aid. Yeah, I think I will just end it there and just say I'm looking forward to seeing this bill pass, and I hope that it's just a first step in a lot of different protections that we can set up for tenants. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Appreciate you spending some time with us this evening and for your good work with St. Louis Mutual Aid. Jill O'Brien, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Jill. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Hey everyone, my name is Jill O'Brien. I have been attending Washington University School of Law for the past few years, and I've loved being a St. Louis resident. I've also been involved in outreach work with Tent Mission STL and working to build community and solidarity with our unhoused neighbors, almost all of whom have been evicted at some point in their lives. I had the opportunity to intern in New York City for the past 6 months, working at a legal aid organization in homeless rights, ensuring folks' rights within the New York City shelter system were not being violated. New York City has right to counsel and also has had a right to shelter since the 1980s. I saw both of those rights oftentimes intertwined, playing out in the lives of my clients and the importance of those protections as my clients navigated unstable housing circumstances. Some of my clients were in the New York City shelter system after losing their eviction cases, despite having a lawyer to represent them through right to counsel. Right to counsel does not always mean that the tenant wins. But as it currently stands, a lopsided playing field all but ensures that a tenant in an eviction action will in fact be evicted without an attorney. Right to counsel is evening the playing field. Right to counsel means that my clients had a legal professional who were able to ensure that they were advocated for, to ensure that landlords were following the law, and to ensure that they were not illegally locked out. It means that my clients, even when they had to leave their homes and enter the shelter system, had an opportunity to be heard and had been connected to resources. Finally, I want to touch on the fact that we live in a place that has chosen time and time again to criminalize homelessness. Normally, when a state or a city criminalizes something, it's because they don't want it to continue occurring. If we set aside the fact that criminalizing homelessness is disgusting and cruel, if the state is going to continue to criminalize folks sleeping outside, then we should be doing something to ensure that folks who are housed are able to stay housed and are not having their rights trampled on in eviction court because they cannot afford legal representation. Housing is a human right, and human rights must have adequate legal protections. Board Bill 180 is an incredible opportunity for St. Louis, and I'm looking forward to seeing it pass. Thank you.
Jill, thanks for such insightful points and also for spending some time with us this evening. I appreciate it. We are moving along. Is Amanda Gardner with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Amanda. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great, thank you. You have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Ray Gardner. I'm a renter, a concerned resident of the current 9th Ward and the Community Collaborations Associate at Arch City Defenders, where I'm an organizer with the We the Tenants campaign. I'm here today in strong support of Board Bill 180 and the right to counsel and eviction proceedings. I'm fortunate that I haven't had a personal experience with eviction. However, I have been a renter in St. Louis, living at the poverty line and spending nearly 80% of my paychecks on rent. In exchange for these rental payments, I received substandard housing complete with mold, burst pipes, pests, and numerous code violations. As I tried to seek recourse for these problems, I was notified by my landlord of a hidden clause in my lease that waived my landlord of any liability for the hundreds of dollars of personal property damage I experienced due to poor maintenance. Every month, management sent reminders of the rent deadline, the fee schedule for late rent, and the threat of eviction within that single month for folks unable to pay for this substandard housing. These routine emails never address the landlord side of the transaction, the promise of habitable housing in exchange for my money. In my work in housing justice, I have met folks who faced eviction because they dared to report their unlivable living conditions, including mothers who were simply trying to raise their children in healthy homes. I've heard stories of tenants facing eviction because their landlord failed to pay property taxes, regardless of whether they paid their rent or not. Eviction happens because of job loss, health emergencies, and so many other circumstances that are quite often outside of the tenant's control. In a city where a quarter of our renters are severely rent burdened, the prospect of eviction is not just an abstract thought for many of us, but a real threat to thousands of tenants and their families. We've asked our campaign members to envision how right to counsel will impact the lives of St. Louis tenants. Their answers went beyond just reduced eviction rates and increased housing stability. Tenants predict increased neighborhood pride and engagement, better health outcomes, and more accountability for bad actor landlords who exploit our most vulnerable residents. I ask the Health and Human Services Committee and the Board of Aldermen for favorable consideration of Board Bill 180.
Thank you so much, Amanda, especially for that very personal story. Those are not always easy to share. Next up, we have Eddie Gamble. Is Eddie with us? Oh, there you are. Hi, Eddie. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. I'll be quick. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, please proceed.
Okay, I'll be quick. My name is Eddie. I'm a resident on Folsom Avenue near the Tiffany Heights area. I'm with Action St. Louis and We the Tenants Movement, and I am currently a renter. My story is more about my neighbor. He came to me about a rent increase since we both have the same landlord. I didn't receive the notice, but he did. He sort of panicked. He texted me in sort of anger, just trying to figure out what the legality is, what was his options. I tried to give him some contact information through my connection through Action St. Louis. When I tried to follow up, he was very cagey. And then as of right now, me and my wife haven't seen him or his boyfriend who lived in the property for about a week or two. Personally, my story as a newer resident within the last 3 years, somebody with family drama, the connections I make with my neighbors and are important to keeping me in the city and keeping me healthy mentally and emotionally. To live in a kind of space where you don't know when you're going to lose your neighbors, when you're going to lose your friends. I mean, like we had them over, I had helped worked on his car, creates an unstable kind of mental and emotional atmosphere. And so I just want to ask the board to consider that avenue of it. Yes, financially, justice, there are so many things, there are benefits, but on the ground level, there is also an emotional and mental health component to the passage of Board Bill 180, right to counsel and such tenant protections. And obviously I support the bill, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for bringing up those incredibly important points. It's not just a financial issue. It's a mental health issue. It's trauma. It's so much more. Kennedy Gardner with EHOC.
Thank you.
There you are. Do you affirm? Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Kennedy Mears Gardner, and I'm an attorney with the Metropolitan St. Louis Equal Housing and Opportunity Council. And I come before this board today to encourage you all to pass Board Bill 180 out of committee. Likely, I'm one of the only attorneys in St. Louis actively representing tenants in eviction cases in St. Louis City and County, and I'm here to appeal to you all on a personal level based on what I see in the courts each and every day. As you've already heard, the odds are blatantly against tenants, and when these evictions are disproportionately impacting people of color, individuals with disabilities, seniors, and LGBTQIA+ folks, the impact is even more disparaging. In St. Louis City, there are only a couple of attorneys and organizations who represent tenants. Many of us spread so thin by the sheer amount of folks that are in need of help. Many days it's a choice between stepping in to represent a single mother and her 3 kids, or an elderly woman who has a disability and lives on a fixed income. It's showing up to a court to represent 3 clients while 200 other tenants sit outside the courtroom hoping for your help. On a personal level, it's a really heart-wrenching decision to make every day, but it's one we are forced to make. And with a right to counsel, that decision would already be made. Everyone would have representation. I've only been practicing for a year. I am a proud graduate of Professor Tokarz's legal clinic, and I was an intern with EHOC for a couple of years before I started this practice. And what a whirlwind year it's been. I was just looking at the numbers. I represented a total of 60 families in eviction court over this last year. And at least half of those folks have been able to stay in their home. And so I haven't had an eviction in the past couple of months. So that shows you what can happen when there is an attorney, even a brand new one, representing tenants in landlord-tenant court. And I think we can all agree that housing is essential. So I'll go to a couple of points that I have that probably were already repeated by other folks, but reasons for why right to counsel is so beneficial to the city of St. Louis. Having every tenant represented by counsel will keep bad actor landlords in check. I know some older people were concerned about that. And so those are the slumlords who don't take care of their properties that everyone's been mentioning. It's the same people who are violating the city ordinances about illegal lockouts and violating the property maintenance codes. They're just maintaining their properties in a way that's illegal. The court's time will be saved. We've already talked about this a little bit. And passing a right to counsel, I think this might be most important, shows tenants in the city of St. Louis that you guys care about them. And that's so, so important. They make up a huge proportion of your voting block and the people that live in and around you in the community. So I won't take any more of your time. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak. And EHOC and myself really appreciate you considering and passing Board Bill 180 out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you. You made me tear up. Incredibly grateful for the work you're doing and that you're a part of this cause. Next
right back at you. Thank you.
Next up, Inez Bordeaux with Archcity Defenders.
Hi.
Do you affirm that?
I'm so glad you all.
Really quickly, I apologize. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. You've got 2 minutes.
My name is Inez Bordeaux. I'm the manager of community collaborations at Arch City Defenders. I'm also the committee woman of the 9th Ward, new 3rd Ward. I wear a lot of different hats, but today the hat I'm wearing, I'm showing up as a person who has been evicted. I know what it feels like to have the sheriff's department come to your house and put all of your belongings on the street. I know what it feels like to show up in court without a lawyer and present all the evidence in the world of having a slum landlord, having lead in your apartment, having all of these different issues, and the judge ruling against you anyway. So I really applaud you all doing this. I want to use the rest of my time really to ask a question or a couple of questions. Over the last couple of weeks, maybe even last week, we heard an older person talking about how they are a landlord. We know that several members of the board of aldermen are landlords. So I'm asking, how is this not a conflict of interest for there to be alders who have complained about the way tenants have left buildings, how they're owed money, so on and so forth. So how can we have those members of the board voting on legislation that directly impacts them? And not in the way that like voting rights or climate change or different things affect you. This is literally their business. This is their side hustle, being a landlord. So how is it okay that we're allowing elected officials to vote on legislation that directly impacts their business? More than that, I want to say that we are watching. I am watching, we are watching, the community is watching, and I'm interested to see what happens when this legislation passes out of committee and goes in front of the full board. I cannot wait to watch the meetings where we have alders argue against passing a right to counsel for poor people, marginalized people, neglected people, people who have slum landlords, in the interest of protecting their own personal business. So I hope that we get some of the answers to those questions, preferably in writing, issued to the public where we can all meet it or where we can all read it. But more than anything, I support the right to counsel. I can't imagine anyone arguing against the right to counsel. And I really, really thank you all for taking up this very important issue. And I will close by asking, can we do Airbnbs next? After we get right to counsel, can we talk about how we don't have any housing in St. Louis because of Airbnbs? Thank you.
Yes, Inez, you've brought up some incredibly important points. There are a number of us who are looking at the conflict of interest issue, not just with right to counsel, but also with the lead and bill that Alderman Ryan put forward. And I'm still working on short-term rental legislation. I did not get it in time. We thought we would have some ability to extend the dates to introduce board bills. And even though I'm not seeking re-election. I am still working on that behind the scenes and hope to pass it off to someone else. That being said, Keith Rose has asked that we skip him over at least momentarily, and we will move to John Carroll. Is John with us?
Hi, yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you so much. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, it is.
Great. You've got 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thanks so much. I've been a city resident for 16 years. I've been a renter up until recently. I am now a landlord over in the Southampton neighborhood. But prior to that, I've worked in homeless shelters in the city. I've worked in public education in the city. I've seen how important housing is, excuse me, and how impactful evictions are. And I think that housing is a human right, and it's a requirement for public health and good public outcomes for individuals and communities. So I just wanted to speak fully in support of Board Bill 180, say that right to counsel is the right thing to do. It's a requirement, I think, for the community, and we've got to help level the playing field. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. I really value your perspective as a landlord, especially. We have Claudia Brody. I hope I'm saying that correctly, from McCormick Barron. Is Claudia with us?
Hello.
Did I pronounce your last name correctly? Brody?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, Claudia, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Can you hear me, Claudia?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to provide testimony tonight. My name is Claudia Brody, and I'm here on behalf of McCormick Barron, a St. Louis-based developer and manager of affordable housing. We have experience with urban affordable housing states. We are also a large landlord of affordable and mixed income housing in the city of St. Louis, predominantly on the north side of St. Louis. We support Board Bill 180. The status quo is not serving our communities or our families. What we saw during COVID was a collaborative effort between landlords, service providers, social justice leaders, mediation work, thank you, Professor Kotars, and in some cases, collaborative work with the courts to help keep families housed. As we come through this unprecedented 2.5 years, we must find ways to continue this collective work to keep families housed and avoid homelessness. Attorneys working on both sides can not only bring equitable arrangements, but provide a runway to make sure families connect with resources and services to either remain in place or find alternative housing without an eviction on their record. We don't benefit from evictions or want evictions. Evictions have an overall disruptive impact on the stability of our families and the success of our communities. Right to counsel and equal bargaining power is always the right approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. I think, again, it's incredibly illustrative that we have individuals like you representing McCormick Barron, who's a landlord, and Val from the Housing Authority, speaking to the fact that this is very collaborative in its efforts. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We are moving along to Abigail Leonard with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. Is Abigail here?
Well, it's not Abigail. And she and I were talking and agreeing that y'all probably thought it was going to be her. But my name is Susan Alberson. I'm an attorney with Legal Services. Hi, Lee. Hi, Karen.
Susan, if I just interrupt you really quickly,
Sure.
If you're going to testify, do you mind if I swear you in?
Of course.
Great. Thank you so much. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for being here. You have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Yeah. Hi. So I had some statistics to read, but I, don't need to do that. And I think a lot has been said very, very articulately, very clearly about the need for right to counsel. I could talk about my own experience. For 37 years, I have defended tenants. And when in my experience has been when I go to court, I represent as many folks as I can, but so many of the folks are not being represented. And I wish I could multiply. Myself, we go out and talk to law firms. We get great volunteers, and I tell them, and they come back feeling great about the experience of helping somebody as a volunteer attorney. And basically, it's because the minute an attorney is involved in a case, we never lose. I mean, our client might owe money, and ultimately they can't afford the place, but the effect of the lawsuit is not the way it would have been if they had tried to defend themselves, or if they hadn't gone to court and a default judgment was issued, or they were forced to sign a consent judgment. Every day someone calls our office, they go to court, they sign the consent judgment. They don't understand that the consent judgment is not a good thing. It is not a payment plan. But why are they signing it? They're signing it because they don't know what to do. They're signing it because they don't have the advice of a counsel. So right to counsel would be great. I was in court today with a colleague of mine. She is an attorney that represents landlords. And I told her I was going to be talking tonight. And she said, I am so in favor of it. Landlords attorneys are in favor of this too. I think most people pretty much get sick of sitting and watching. It's like a candy, cooking, with how horrible it is, trials that last 5 minutes. I defended a client. We got involved after she got a judgment against her, and I was able to keep her from being evicted, keep her Section 8 rental assistance. But the judgment against her was like $28. $28 was going to be something, was going to see her be evicted. An attorney can, even if the client's going to ultimately can't keep that place, the attorney makes sure it's not on the record, gets a dismissal, tries to get the security level raised to make sure that that case doesn't follow that person around. It is, what everybody has said here tonight is it will benefit everybody. It will benefit the courts, landlords, the community, preserve housing, keep money in the city. So, like the person just said, how could somebody vote against it? I don't know. But I'm here on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of Legal Services of Eastern Missouri to request Board Bill 180 be passed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for your obvious commitment to this issue over the years. I know Legal Services provides a huge percentage of representation for a lot of our residents who are going through this process. Jake Lionfeld, are you here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah. I think a lot of the points that I was going to make have been echoed, so I'll just say a couple of things briefly, and then yield back the rest of my time. But number one, I think this bill is important because we ought to be guaranteeing representation in all civil cases generally, but we don't do that in this country. So this is a good step in that direction. And number two, I, for about 7 years, all in the city of St. Louis, was a landlord for folks who were housing insecure, low income, disabled, queer, Black. These folks are at the margins in so many ways. And one thing that I learned through that experience is just how much power landlords have. And we had great relationships with the folks we were renting with, and I still call many of them friends, but that's not really the point. The point is how much power is at the landlord's disposal and how quickly and sometimes arbitrarily people could have the opportunity to completely upend the people's lives. So I'm really excited about Board Bill 180 because I think it enshrines at least some measure of protection for tenants and especially for our most vulnerable tenants. And then the only thing that I'm wondering about with this bill is just what the allocation, the initial allocation is going to be. I'm really excited about this, but I actually don't think I understand how many resources are going to be allocated initially to this. So I'd love to learn more about that, just so we know what the first year impact is going to be, and then what we could do years out from now as well. So I appreciate you listening, and I hope you all have a good evening.
Thanks so much for your testimony, and we are definitely still working on the details of the budget. And I will reach out to you so you can get some more specific information for me. Is Sarah Watkins on the line?
Thank you.
Sure. Sarah, are you with us? I see your name, but you're not popping up on the screen for me. Oh, there you are. Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you. Do you affirm that the, oh, hold on. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great, please proceed.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sarah Watkins. I live in the new 7th Ward. I'm a housing advocate and tenant organizer with Homes for All St. Louis. We believe that housing is a human right, and we fight for safe, clean, dignified housing. And I'm here to testify in support of Board Bill 180 to bring right to counsel to St. Louis, to tenants in St. Louis, to protect Black women and children who are most likely to face eviction and who suffer the most from housing insecurities. In 2018, I was forced to move from my home when it was condemned due to dangerous conditions that my landlord neglected for years. Soon after, in 2019, I became one of 5,000 households facing eviction in St. Louis when my new landlord filed an eviction in retaliation against me for fighting against the living conditions of myself, my son, and my neighbors. Luckily, after connecting with housing advocates and impacted tenants in my neighborhood, I was able to receive legal assistance from Arch City Defenders. They assisted me with moving costs and an attorney to represent me in court. And so a highlight of that is that he actually discovered the eviction was filed illegally. The case was settled in my favor. However, I'm still left with that eviction on my record, and it has affected the way I search for housing. So as we've heard, the eviction process is intimidating and confusing. Eviction attorneys take advantage of this, which leaves tenants feeling powerless and unheard of because for many of them, justice is out of reach. We see landlords that are continuously allowed to illegally evict tenants and exploit low-income and poor tenants for profit, while tenants are struggling to pay rent amid inflation and rising rent. Right to counsel would protect tenants, and it begins to reduce the harm of the city's complacency of the crooked and negligent landlord-tenant culture that thrives at the cost of the mental and physical health of Black lives in this city. So to this committee, to the Board of Aldermen, to everyone listening, really, I ask that you think about what role you play in the current housing crisis, how you can use your power and influence to advance more renter protections. And then lastly, I just want to say that the education and engagement piece is very vital because through increased tenant awareness, we can further expose the practices of landlords and the struggles of tenants and hear the stories we need to determine how to transform housing policy and conditions for tenants, because right to counsel for St. Louis is just the beginning. And yeah, my community invested in me and helped me get the resources I needed to stay in my home. And I think everyone who faces eviction deserves that same opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate all the work you do and your perspective as well. Next up, we have Sandra Keeley. I don't see Sandra.
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Are you able to get on camera at all?
No, I'm not. Can you hear me okay though?
We can hear you. We typically don't take testimony without being able to see someone, but I understand that there are technical difficulties from time to time. So please proceed. You have, actually, hold on. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. I'm very much in support of Board Bill 180. I know the trauma and despair that families experience as being the relocation consultant during the 1993 flood, where people lost all of their belongings, but because of help from federal agencies, they were able to move on to better circumstances. But I personally experienced the E word when I went through a divorce. My finances were terribly devastated as a result. I fought my mortgage company and had called around to try to find attorneys that could represent me, but found that all the attorneys worked for the banks. And you do run into that in terms of not being able to find attorneys that will take your cases. If you do not have income, that will cover their fees. So I really support the Board Bill 180. And as the other gentleman said, I would like a lot more of the details, because if the tenants are given the right to counsel, are there enough lawyers that will be able to step up? So I'm hoping that as the legislation is being written, that it would provide for other laypersons to be trained in tenant law, and make sure that the need is being met, because it is huge. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. There's definitely going to be a ramp up phase of this. Like, we're not going to be able to have the legal representation we need for everyone at the beginning, but we're trying to be very thoughtful about representing the most critical needs first, and then also being very thoughtful about a community outreach and engagement piece, to make sure that as many people know about this as possible. All right, Chris Wilcox, I see you. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Chris Wilcox. I live in the downtown West neighborhood in Ward 6. For people who aren't tenants themselves, I believe it is often underappreciated just how overwhelmingly lopsided the balance of power is between landlords and tenants. I support Board Bill 108 because guaranteeing an effective right to counsel for tenants facing eviction is a small but meaningful step to rectify that imbalance and to prevent unnecessary human suffering as we enter the next phase of a housing crisis, where securing safe and affordable housing remains out of reach as the last of the federal economic assistance fades away. As you may know, federal rental assistance will no longer be taking applications in Missouri as of February 1st. This is the last resort of many tenants whose need for help with the rising cost of living has only increased as the economic response to the COVID-19 pandemic that's still very much raging. I know how dire it is for many low-income people from close contacts I've had over the last 3 years, both as an organizer with St. Louis Mutual Aid and as a staff member of a Red Circle, a nonprofit that serves in North St. Louis County. I've observed that struggling with the cost of housing has been the single most common concern for low and moderate income people I've worked with in both St. Louis City and County. Tenants' rights are limited to begin with, and they effectively don't exist if tenants don't have those rights protected. Often tenants are coerced into giving up their rights voluntarily because they don't know they have a right to court proceeding at all, or to make an affirmative defense when their landlord has not upheld their minimum expectations. At a rental assistance clinic last week, one tenant told me that their application was denied because their landlord could not even establish documentation of ownership to the state's satisfaction. Implementing a right to counsel would enforce a minimal legal standard for landlords. Finally, we must never forget that eviction is a violent process. It is a practice in which a person is forcibly removed from their home, offering surrendering their possessions in the process, simply so that an investor may put an asset human beings need to live back on the market to perform for them financially. Anything we can do to stop this practice is worth it. I ask the Board of Aldermen to pass Board Bill 108 because establishing a tenant right to counsel is a first step in reducing harm and guaranteeing a meaningful right of a home to all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for illustrating the absolute trauma that is tied to evictions. I just wanted to note that we're at 7:15. We've been at this for 2 hours and 15 minutes. We are only at public testimony person number 22. We have 57 people signed up. And so if you are able to truncate your testimony to anything below 2 minutes, please do so. I'm not trying to not allow you the opportunity to speak because you absolutely deserve to. I just want to be very cognizant of the fact that it's late in the evening and I want as many people to be able to testify as possible. I think we've lost almost all of our committee members at this point. I don't see anybody else besides myself on video, and I only see 2 other members of the committee who are still logged in. So with that, Basmeen Nadra, you are up next.
Good evening, relatives, and I won't reiterate so much of the great information.
Really quickly, I apologize. I just have to swear you in. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I affirm.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. Please proceed.
Good evening, relatives. I'm a a St. Louisan who has had the privilege of living in the family home for 64 years here in St. Louis. I've been a renter and a landlord here and in other places. I believe that housing is a right for each individual. I believe that we should have seen the destabilizing effects of evictions all around the city. I don't want to reiterate much of the information that has been shared here already. I would tell one personal story of an elder who received their eviction notice and with their health disparities had a heart attack and died very shortly after receiving the eviction notice. I find that the people who are most in need of the resources are not always aware the resources are available and the information doesn't reach them. I had the curious situation of my personal phone number being one number off from the number for rental and mortgage assistance that was offered in the county. And I had many conversations with people more than once over the 1.5 year period of things not being addressed in a timely manner, so that people who were applying for assistance were not able to receive that because of the untimely manner of getting back to them. I know that when people have resources and they have an attorney to represent them, the whole dynamic changes. I want us to remember as this data and this information is being translated, that these are human beings. These are people. Actions speak. When we do something beyond what is on the paper and actually attend to the community and the biggest small town in America, the information will reach the community and there will be more harmony throughout. I will say that I'm aware that when evictions are occurring, people are being locked out and their possessions are being confiscated, that sometimes pets are being left in these apartments and in these places, so that there are animals that are being unkept. And we know that the growing population of unhoused individuals in America right now are women over 50, disproportionately affecting women of color of all income and education levels. So it's not, you don't have to be criminalized because you're not doing negative things to get yourself in the position of being evicted and unhoused. So let's not create more unhoused individuals in St. Louis. I have been disheartened to see all the disproportionate allocation of resources in the city, and I would like to see Board Bill 180 impacted so we can go a 180 turn and give value back to the human beings who are making the difference in so many lives.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for such thoughtful testimony. I have someone named Keisha without a last name on the 800 block of North O'Fallon.
See Keisha.
Okay. Marquita Tolbert.
I don't see Marquita either.
Okay. Candace Fleming.
I don't see Candace Fleming.
Georgette Browder or Javier Favela.
Javier Favela is here.
Okay. Javier. He's here, but he's not here. We might come back to him. Anita White or Jack Ditton. Gabby Eisner, Troy Lee.
Gabby Eisner is here.
We also have Troy Lee here as well.
Okay, great. Could you get Troy on camera, Kennard?
Yeah, 1 second.
I think Gabby was first.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so either Gabby or is Gabby on with Kennard or, oh, there you are. Okay, I apologize. Thanks for helping me keep track of this, Laura. Gabby, do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Gabby Eisner. I'm a tenant in the 17th Ward or the new 9th Ward. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Interfaith Committee on Latin America, a local nonprofit that works with asylum seekers and immigrants of all statuses. And I really just want to emphasize what others have said and urge you to pass Board Bill 180. Over the past few years, I've worked with immigrants in the St. Louis region. Many of them have experienced undignified and frankly uninhabitable living conditions. They often don't complain about mold and rats and bed bugs and other needed repairs out of fear of retaliation and fear of eviction. And Right to Counsel would change that and would give St. Louis the opportunity to correct some of these injustices. Legal representation for tenants is the means to ensure that all tenants, including immigrant tenants, are heard and not evicted. And with that, thank you for the opportunity to testify and urge you to pass Board Bill 180.
Thank you so much for being here and for making the time. Who is up next, Madam Clerk?
Troy Lee.
All right. Kennard, are you ready with Troy?
Yep, good to go.
Hi, Troy. So nice to see you. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Troy Lee. I'm of St. Louis, a 66-year-old disabled Marine Corps vet. I support Bill 180 for the moral and mental discipline of the aldermen to allow tenant campaign for the right to counsel. To apply this term, the communicated knowledge to members of all classes. Our aim is to assist tenants in the legal process of eviction, such as filing counterclaims with pictures and documents, holding out-of-state property owners liable for conditions, and confront the owners to make changes for better living of the resident. I lived in South St. Louis in a building owned by the Theory Group of Phoenix, Arizona. Scott Williams, a screwed up lease, and after 4 days, I was asked to void my lease and vacate. My lease should have been 365 days, but I was given only 352. I moved to Forest Park apartment owned by Odin Property, Paul Balderson. I was given an apartment with no heat and no air conditioning for nearly 20 months. Later, I have a heater, and the owner denies it was ever broken. The management threatened residents with unauthorized pets in the building. The resident can be forced to vacate or eviction. Older property needs to fix the unauthorized pets they have already, mice and roaches. I have contacted HUD, St. Louis Housing, Fair Housing, Renters' Right, Business Administration, Attorney General of Missouri, the Mayor of St. Louis, and different departments and legal aid for assistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being willing to share your personal story. I really appreciate it. Madam Clerk, I think we already had Mr. Viola. Okay. Ann Jeanette Smith.
I don't see Ann Jeanette Smith.
Cassidy Shannon.
No.
Chalun Lomax.
Yes.
Can you pronounce your name for me? I apologize.
It's Shalon.
Shalon. Okay, that's so much more lovely than I presented it. Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Shalon Lomax, and I'm a second-year law student at Washington University, and I'm also one of Professor Tokar's clinic students. And I really just wanted to speak about the impact of eviction on Black women specifically. Earlier speakers have already established that the scarlet letter E has a derailing effect on one's record and ability to secure safe, affordable housing moving forward. But this impact is pronounced for Black women. Black women are evicted at alarming rates. And according to the ACLU, the number of women evicted is 16% higher than the number of men evicted. And Black women face eviction filings at nearly twice the rate of white women. Sociologist Matthew Desmond said, poor Black men are locked up and poor Black women are locked out. An eviction is to Black women what a criminal record is to Black men. Both are damning, destructive, and destabilizing. And as Desmond also said, without stable shelter, everything else falls apart. And when the stakes are this high, renters should be provided with all of the tools that they need to fight for themselves. Right to counsel is a key step in evening the playing field because lawyers are trained to help people navigate the system and all of the procedural hurdles that come with it, because lawyers can help translate a tenant's personal narrative into a way that makes an actual impact on their case. And since most landlords have representation, I firmly believe that tenants should too. And today I just ask the committee use its power to inject more fairness into eviction proceedings and approve Board Bill number 180. Thank you so much.
Shalon, thank you for reiterating the fact that we know that 85% of the filings in St. Louis are against Black folks. 65% of those are single Black women working in the single service industry who are single parents. And so we have, again, a lot of work to do in this area, and I'm hoping that right to counsel is one way to address that. So appreciate your time. It looks like we can backtrack.
Excuse me, you guys skipped me, and I wasn't going to say anything at all, but everybody else before me inspired me to speak up.
Yeah, Cass, could you just really quickly, I apologize. I see you on camera now, so we'll make sure that you have time to testify. I just have to swear you in quickly, if that's okay. If you would affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in your testimony.
I do.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Thanks for being here. Please proceed.
Thanks for letting me get a chance to even be here. Thanks for everybody that attended and everything. My name is Chastity Shannon. I live in SLH up in North County. That's my management company, and I basically wanted to had something else to say, basically the same thing y'all been saying the whole time, but now I believe that this council I was basically evicted before I came here, and I was homeless for 7 years. And that's basically being retaliated against, and my son is disabled and he's being discriminated against right now of 2 violations that is petty and not even, I have contacted everybody at SLH, and it's just been getting stressful. I have 5 children, and like I said, I have 2 violations, and I cannot be like, just because I'm taking up for myself even when I call for small things like work order, community service, safety, incidents, anything, I have been even like just violated for like I said, petty things. And I had to even get a police order, protection order for about my son, and they shot 8 times in the arm. Like I'm
Chastity, I'm so sorry.
I'm not trying to get this, but this will help me to get counsel, to get over whatever. If this becomes, I have to get out of here because of things like this. That's all I'm saying. It would have helped me then, and it can help me probably now. And I just hope that it doesn't do this. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Chastity, thank you so much for, again, being personal in your testimony. I've got your email address. I'm going to email you to see if there's anything I can do to be helpful with your particular situation.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Absolutely.
Everybody.
Madam Clerk, does it look like to you Jill O'Brien is next?
Yes, but I don't see Jill O'Brien.
Okay, and Karen Tokars went.
She already spoke.
Amy Gilly.
I did see Jane Gilly, but I'm not seeing her now.
Candace Fleming or
No.
Brian Anderson.
No.
Jenna Boaz or Miranda Alexander.
No.
Sharon Jones. I'm sure Sharon's here somewhere.
There's Sharon. She just came on.
I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, don't apologize. Nice to see you, friend.
You as well.
Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay.
I will be brief. I'm so sorry. I'll be brief because folks who have gone before me have made excellent points. I want to make 3 main points. First, that renters suffer from a lack of knowledge. And I was one of those renters when I was evicted in 2017. I literally thought a default judgment was a good thing. I was so uneducated. The second point that I want to make is that we've danced around it, but we haven't explicitly said it. Professor Tokar
almost got to it, but there is a cronyism that exists between the courts and lawyers. When I was being evicted in 2017, the lawyers literally were having a conversation about golfing with one another. And then the judge and the lawyers were having this side conversation as if they were all friends. So not only are we dealing with the lack of representation, but we're dealing with representation, or we're dealing with lawyers in a court system that they all know each other, but we don't know each other. And we don't know the law. And I'll just stop there with those two main points, even though I have 3 to give folks back their time. And thank y'all so much.
Sharon, thank you for your testimony. I am incredibly grateful for the work that you do with Homes for All. Sharon was also a participant in the sprint that we did that I mentioned earlier. And so has been dedicated in the trenches in this work for a long time. Is Sunny Hutton available for testimony?
I don't see Sunny Hutton.
Charles Buchanan or Christian Blackman?
I don't see either one of them.
Okay, Eddie Gamble or Wanda Rogers?
I thought Eddie Gamble had spoke earlier. Wanda Rogers, I don't show Wanda. Or Lee's already spoken.
Maddie Kronfeld, Damon Starks, or Trenda Davis?
I think we can move down probably to Fatima.
One second. Damon Davis, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, don't apologize, Kennard. Keep.
Sorry, Damon Starks, not Damon Davis.
You've got Damon Starks? Okay.
Okay. Where's Damon Starks?
I think Kennard might have Damon come on.
Okay.
Hi, David. Hi, I have to swear you in really quickly. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thanks for being here. You have 2 minutes.
All right. Well, my name is Damon Starks. I live in Midtown. I am representing Action St. Louis through the campaign of We the Tenants. I am here today to stress the importance of and the benefit of passing BB 180 for the rights to counsel for tenants. Here in St. Louis, 55.3% of the housing units are occupied by renters. Now that means this bill is much needed, and it will only make sense for it to pass. By passing the bill, this gives renters legal representation in court facing evictions. Now with that, you got to ask yourself, when you go to court for any reason, would you like a legal representative? And I'm quite sure it'll be in your best interest to have that legal representative. So with that being said, that legal rep will be there to know the ins and outs and understand how the law works. Most people do not know their rights in the sense of in the renter case. So you ask yourself again, this bill is beneficial for that reason. This will give our community that legal representation. Then in our community, one of 25 renters are threatened with evictions every year, and one of 40 were evicted. And Black people have a higher eviction filing of 6.1%, with the eviction judgment of 3.4%. Now, with those stats, it is extremely important, and it just makes sense to pass Bill BB 180 in order for St. Louis to grow. In order for St. Louis to grow, we must first invest in the people. The people are the tenants, not the landlords. Most of the landlords out here are slumlords anyhow, so therefore invest in the community. This is your opportunity that you have to invest in the people. Let's see that happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for your very poignant facts on the percentages of how critical this issue really is. I appreciate it. Moving on, do we have Trenda Davis or Marquisha Eberhardt?
I don't see either one of them, but I do see Fatima Camara and Maisha Johnson. So I think Fatima will go first.
Great. Fatima, are you ready? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. You have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
All right. Good evening. My name is Fatima Kamara. I live on the west side of the city. I work for Action St. Louis, and I'm also with the We the Tenants campaign. When I was 7 and lived in Maryland, my family, we were evicted from our home. And even though our stuff was thrown out on the lawn and it even rained that day, I actually am luckier than a lot of folks because my mother was able to shelter me from a lot of the impact. Even though we have to move in with our brother, me and my sister, my mother, we moved in with our brother, and my mom was able to drive us to school, even though it was much farther on our way to work. And I see that that's not an option for a lot of folks. As a teacher last year in St. Louis, when the bus driver shortage happened, a lot of folks, a lot of kids who missed their bus or their bus did not come to school that day. And if they did, they were an hour or two late. So that option of driving further and moving further, we ended up moving 4 hours away, isn't an option for a lot of people. They rely on their family members for childcare, and they can't move away from them, even if they could find somewhere. I also, as a teacher, saw kids who were living in shelters and not able to stay awake during school because they couldn't sleep at the shelter at night. They were going to bed extremely late because they're being shuffled from family member to family member during the week or even daily. And so I've also, as an organizer, I've heard stories of people with horrible living situations because they're stuck in them, sewage backing up in their house, mold and lead in their house, not having AC during a St. Louis summer, not having heat during a St. Louis winter. Excuse me. Like everyone said, I guess where to council would level the playing field between renters and landlords, especially these massive property management companies who are able to file bulk evictions, who are displacing folks with very few resources or none at all. So I urge the board to pass Board Bill 180.
Fatima, thank you so much for your testimony this evening. I know you've been doing quite a bit of work behind the scenes to organize tenants, and that work is incredibly appreciated by me. We'll move to Maisha, and then I think Keith Rose has joined us again, but after that, we're going to cut off testimony and wrap this up. Maisha, nice to see you. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. You have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maisha Johnson. I am a community member in the Dutchtown neighborhood, which is now the 3rd Ward. Though a lot of people in this space have already hit on a lot of the issues that we experience in St. Louis as well as South City. Often what you see in North City occurs in South City, and I would like to see the two to stop being separated when funding or development comes about. For me, it is the billboard 180 is important because we know that there are more laws that support landlords than it does tenants. Often landlords neglect their properties, as many said in this space, and it falls on the tenant to make it habitable or livable for their children and themselves to live in. This also caused mental breakdown for, as we heard, majority Black women that experience this trauma. It's trauma. And it causes health issues for women, and we know that's lack there in that space as well. What I would like to see is that this bill board 180 to pass and support tenants in the right to counsel. Often they do not understand the language used in the space when attending court, or even know the proper procedures to take to file to file a case against the landlord. I can't think of what it's called right now, but it is important that they know their rights, and often don't know their rights, and that experiencing an eviction. And it causes mental breakdown, not just with the mother, but the children seeing the mother or father go through these experiences. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And I know you're another person who has spent a lot of your time committed to making sure that tenants are taken care of correctly, and that we're able to move some of these issues forward in St. Louis. So appreciate that. Keith, are you with us? Okay, do you affirm that the testimony you were about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do so affirm.
Great, you've got 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thanks for your patience. So good evening. My name is Keith Rose. I live in Tower Grove South, and I work at the Equal Housing and Opportunity Council in our eviction defense program. After years of volunteering in emergency winter shelters, I decided to join EHOC's eviction defense program last spring because I came to the realization that it requires less effort, less money, and causes less harm for someone to maintain housing than to obtain housing. If our city is going to implement a housing-first solution to homelessness, then we should start by protecting the housing that individuals already have. Doing so will save government funds, increase public safety, and decrease violent crime. EHOC operates an eviction defense hotline, and over the past year, we've seen an increase in calls from St. Louisans seeking legal assistance, but our small program cannot handle the cases coming in. As such, every single week, our staff members have to tell callers that we won't be able to take their eviction case, and that we can only provide self-advocacy materials, and maybe referrals to one of the few other agencies doing this work. I remember the last time I suggested to a caller that they call legal services, she told me, but they told me to call you. Alderman, the status quo is not sustainable. Tenants' needs are not being met. St. Louis needs an adequately funded right to counsel. I also want to underscore the fact that we're not only talking about evictions that originate with non-payment. Many tenants don't understand their rights under the Fair Housing Act and won't invoke them. A universal access to legal counsel will increase protections for women facing evictions after threats, facing threats of evictions for not cooperating with sexual harassment. Will help protect families facing evictions for having children, and will help protect disabled renters facing evictions after requesting reasonable accommodations. Alderman, please pass Board Bill 180 so that we can have this right to counsel in St. Louis and we can protect these rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. Appreciate the work you're doing in this arena, and for you spending some time to testify on behalf of Board Bill 180. I think there's a few of us left standing on the board. Alderman Page and Alderman Gross, do you have any questions or comments before we wrap up this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions. I just would like to share briefly that I've just been taken aback by the passionate testimonies from both our academic and legal and activist experts, as well as members of the public in general. Their passion came through loud and clear, and they just underscore the importance of Board Bill 180. And I hope we can move it out of committee.
Thank you so much, Alderman. And Alderman Todd, you have
thank you, Madam.
You look like an angel. You're glowing. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate, well, after being homeless as a teenager myself, I appreciate the Board Bill, the testimony, as well as I strongly support Board Bill 180. Our home is a human right. Food, shelter, clothing, medical care, and a home is a human right. And our country certainly can afford to house everyone. And so I strongly support it. And thank you very much for having this meeting.
Absolutely. Thanks for hanging in there with us this evening. It's been it's a doozy of a day for many of us. I think this is my 4th committee hearing. Alderman Grass, do you have any questions or comments before we wrap up?
I just want to echo the comments of my colleagues and really thank the members of the public here. I think I'm probably in the same boat as you. We've been in Zoom meetings the entire day. I really feel like from about 9 o'clock starting. And, you know, when I saw all the speakers signed up tonight, I thought to myself, oh, well, you know, that's going to get repetitive and everything. But I honestly was engaged the whole time. I really couldn't stop listening to it. There were so many good points. It was just a really good meeting, a really good engagement. I very much thank Alderwoman Ingrassia for you know putting this here and getting this going and started in front of us. Again, I just really am. I'm not just saying it, just kind of taken aback by all the good testimony we had here tonight. So thanks again.
Thank you, Alderman, and thanks to everyone for spending the time this evening. I think the expert testimony that we heard, coupled with just the sheer amount of public testimony that was delivered tonight. I don't remember a time. It's been a long time since I've seen this many people sign up for testimony. We not only heard from tenants organizations, but we heard from landlord representation that this is important to move forward. And so while we don't have the members on the committee to move this forward, and there are still some logistics I need to move in terms of a committee substitute, definitely we'll be hearing this board bill again next week to take next steps. And thanks to everyone for their time. I don't think, or did we have any excused members? I think everybody was, Alderman Gunther wasn't not here, maybe.
No, he actually came in for a minute and then.
Okay. Okay, I knew he had something else going on. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks for sticking it out with me for a few hours, all of you. Take so much care. We'll be in touch soon.